Hi everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I am finally doing it. I am taking the plunge. I bought Bethany Beal's ultimate sex course so I can learn to be a good Christian woman experiencing biblical pleasure instead of a disgusting harlot experiencing only ever physical pleasure.
What is up, y'all? Welcome to the ultimate sex course for Christian women. You made it. I'm here, you're here, and we are getting started with these incredible sessions, amazing speakers, and it's just going to be the most incredible, however long it takes you to finish this.
Today we're going to be doing a good old-fashioned review so you can decide for yourself if you want to drop 160 of your hard-earned American dollars on this course. Or, if you're like me, you can grab a discount code from the Fundy Snark subreddit, and I only paid 80 quid for it, which is still far too much. Now, I have to admit before we start, I was very conflicted about making this video because I didn't want to give Bethany Beal any money. You know, homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, posing alongside her Nazi relatives' graves, Bethany Beal. I didn't want to give her money, but I decided that if by giving her this small bit of money now and then reviewing the course, I can help other people make informed decisions about whether they want to give her money in the future. And I can also use this video as an opportunity to help raise some money and give back to a charity that does really amazing work and fights back against so much of the harmful stuff that people like Bethany Beal put out into the world. So that's why I'm going to be donating the same amount of money that I paid Bethany to this amazing charity. I'm going to be paying it out of my own pocket, and I'm also going to be donating a portion of the profits from this video to the same charity, and that is Mermaids. They do this amazing work where they support transgender, non-binary and gender diverse children, young people and their families. I'm also going to be leaving a donation link in the video description and as a pinned comment on this video, so if you want to go and help support them as well, you can do. And I just feel like even though I had to give Bethany a little bit of money for this video, hopefully more good can come out of it and we can donate to a really good cause that genuinely helps people. Mermaids is a really great charity. I've donated to them plenty in the past and I followed along with quite a bit of the work that they do. Their focus is basically on helping educate all people about gender identity, helping support young people and kids, especially with their mental health, as they go through the process of questioning and discovering and realizing their own gender identity. They also actively fight against really harmful and dangerous practices like conversion therapy. The rates of suicide and self-harm amongst transgender people, especially young transgender people, is so disproportionately high because of the lack of support and the prejudice and violence that they have to face every single day. Charities like Mermaids help provide so much of this much needed support and a safe space, which has literally saved so many lives of young transgender people. People like Bethany Beal may be causing direct harm to these people, but hopefully with a video like this we can help give back to charities that do help support them and actually do some good in the world. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this video. I'm going to raise a bit of money, give it to a really good cause, and if you would like to donate as well, like I say, I will leave links in the video description and as a pinned comment so you can find out a little bit more about what Mermaids do, and if you can and would like to donate, that would be amazing too. So with the important stuff out of the way, let's take a look at Bethany Beal's course. This is the ultimate sex course for Christian women, and this is something that she has been promoting all over social media for quite a few months now, and it's something that I touched on in my video The Saga of Bethany Beal, but obviously I hadn't seen the course then, so I couldn't comment on the content specifically.
I've been going crazy working on this course, the ultimate sex course for women, and I have brought on the most incredible people, doctors, psychologists, sexologists, like so many people to help us as Christian women really understand how to thrive in this area of our marriage. The course is going to be absolutely incredible. Don't have sex, save sex for marriage, wait. That's the message many of us heard growing up, and then we get married and we're like, okay, so is this what I waited all this time for?
Like I say, this course is expensive. Bethany is selling this for $169 US. I managed to get it quite a bit cheaper because I found a discount code that she'd posted online, so I used that and I got it for, with conversion rates, about £80. Still expensive, but you know. Sadly, my first impression of this course was how unprofessional everything was. So when you buy it, your access to everything comes kind of sporadically, and I was a little bit unsure about like, wait, what have I actually bought at first. So immediately you get this link to download this little bundle of goodies. And by bundle of goodies, I mean it's a graphic trying to get you to make your friends buy the course too. And I was like, what is this, an MLM? And you also get this little 55-page workbook, which honestly is mostly filled with blank pages, so you can take notes through the video part of these courses. And that, well, we'll look at this in more detail in a second. Then once you've got that, you get this email telling you to go to a different website to purchase the sex course for free there. So you have to do two kind of purchasing actions. One, you give money, one is just for it. It's very weird. And then that provides you with a link to another website. And then finally, after all of that, you have access to the course videos. And then you get another email with a link to the Facebook group. These emails are just like very unprofessional. They come from like a whole bunch of different sources, like the whole bethanybed@gmail.com is like a personal non-work email. You get some from the She Works Smart email addresses. You get some, I think, from the Bethany Girl Defined email address. Like there's just so many different email addresses that this all comes from. It's like, why didn't you send them all from one source? And you have to go through a different website. It's a mess. The emails and the websites are all absolutely riddled with typos and errors and mistakes and stuff like this. Like when you get to the very first page of the actual course with the videos on and everything, even the title is wrong. The Ultimate Sex Course for Christian Woman? Just the one singular woman, I guess, then. And then when you're on the actual video pages, you get this whole like section where like things just haven't been filled in, like details of like who Bethany the instructor is and stuff like that. It's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. There's also, and these are petty things, don't worry, we're going to get to the actual content and the big issues later. But when you look at the workbook and stuff like that, look at the layout of this page. You have this huge gap at the top and then everything is smushed into the bottom. Like, it's not bad, but it's not good. This isn't the quality you expect for something you've paid hundreds of dollars for. Now let's take a look at the actual course content and the videos themselves. This course is split up into 11 sessions or lessons, however you want to call them. Bethany calls them sessions. They're kind of, it's a thing. There's 11 of them. And the first one is Session 1, God's Beautiful Design for Your Sexuality, taught by Bethany herself. First thoughts were that this video quality is not great. It's very clear she's filmed this with like a cheap webcam. There seem to be some syncing issues between the audio and video at times, which is a little off-putting. There's also some slight glitches in places, like actual video glitches and stuff. Again, really poor quality for something that she's selling for such a high price. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if this was a video series that she'd put out for free on YouTube or her personal website or something like that. But because this is a paid course, of course I have higher expectations, you know? And the problem is that, honestly, this is probably one of the highlights in terms of quality. As the series goes on, the video quality and the audio quality gets worse and worse and worse, and it's just, there's some problems. She also does, as we'll see in the later ones, like split screen for most of them, where it's like her on one side and another person talking on the other. And I actually, like, as I was making this video and going through it all, I kept showing my partner bits and being like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, what do you think of her advice? What do you think of the whole set? Like, well, basically I asked his advice, you know, because he's an outsider. He's not familiar with who Bethany is or who Girl Defined are or anything like that. And I was like, you know, as a man, as my partner, and as an outsider to this whole, you know, her whole background, what do you think of this stuff? That's what I wanted to get his opinion on. And his first thing was like, why is there no consistency between which side she's on and the guest speakers? And I was like, oh, okay. Again, it was a petty little thing, but it's like, yeah, okay, these are the small inconsistencies that just scream unprofessional, that just scream laziness, that just scream, I didn't really care about making this course and I just threw things together as quickly as possible as a quick cash grab. So Bethany starts this course by talking about herself and her lack of sexual experience and says that this course is going to be very casual. Take a look at these clips.
This is honestly something that I have been dreaming of really since I got married. But as you know, I have been married for about 4 years, and I knew that if I ever created something like this, it obviously couldn't just be my voice because I have only been married for 4 years. And there are just some things that take time and years of marriage and years of experience to become an expert in and to share about. But even within that, I only have my own experiences. And so that's why I invited all of these experts, all of these other married women. But just to let you know, this entire course is created in a way that is very casual. I wanted this course to feel very comfortable, very personal, very much like coffee shop chats with a friend. So I don't want this to be stiff. I don't want this to feel lecture-y or like you're sitting in a class. I want this to feel literally like you can have your sweats on, you're cozied up with your favorite drink, and you're just like hanging out. So it's intentionally filmed and created in that way. So at some points, if you're like, wow, this feels really casual or like not professional in a sense, that's very intentional. And I want it to feel that way. So
if it's not going to be professional, then don't charge for it. Simple as that. And then she talks about how her daughter is there in every session and then stops mid-sentence to rub a lipstick smear off her face. Seriously, I paid 80 quid for this.
Actually, during the sessions and during the interviews, I have Audrey, my little daughter, for most of those. And she may be wiggling around. She mostly did really well. She cried a little bit, but she did really, really well. But she's in all the sessions with me because, well, it would have been impossible to create this any other way. It's funny. My husband actually has her, and I feel like I have lipstick. Oh, well, we're just going to go for it. My husband actually has the kids right now, so I don't have her in this welcoming session. But
some people are paying $169 for this, and she can't cut these mistakes, errors, awkward moments out of the video. Just like learn to edit and do it. I get that she wants a casual tone. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But there's a difference between casual tone and lazy and unprofessional, you know? You can't just charge people this much money, then make it so poorly, and then be like, but it's meant to be made poorly. That's the point of it.
So just know as you listen to the speakers and as you listen to the sessions, one, you may not agree with everything that the speaker says. You may not agree with everything that they say. You may not even connect with everyone or like everyone. But what I want to ask you to do is to listen with just open ears and an open heart, and don't get into like the critiquing or, I can't believe they said that, I'm going to write everything off that they say, because we're going to be challenged. Like I promise you, we are going to be so challenged in certain areas.
Honestly, this is not a good start, Bethany. No. Like, again, these are my main problems in the beginning. They're like value for money, right? We will get into the content later, don't worry, we're going to talk specifics. But why am I or anyone paying money to be taught by people that you think I won't like and won't agree with? I know that I am personally not the intended audience for this course, but she's saying that the married Christian women that she's trying to target won't like these people, likely. It's very odd. And it gets worse, which at this point I think is becoming like the motto of this channel.
This is going to be just an invitation to go deeper. And you are going to be left wanting, I promise. You are going to get through a session and you're going to say, oh my goodness, I have all of these questions. I want to learn all of this. I want to do more.
Okay, either Bethany doesn't know what the phrase "you'll be left wanting" means, or she just doesn't know how to sell her course. Again, like, why am I paying for a course that is going to leave me wanting, that is going to leave me with questions and gaps in my knowledge and needing to know more because you didn't answer it all? What am I paying for if you're not actually teaching me what you think I'll need to know? At this point, Bethany talks about the private Facebook group that she has for the women who do this course, and I'm just going to mention this now. I didn't join this Facebook group, and I'm not going to. I don't even want to look at it, never mind talk about it in the video, because I didn't think it was fair to kind of essentially spy on real people and real women in their conversations. Like, I can snark on Bethany because she's a public figure. I can review this course because, like anything else, it's a piece of media that I paid for, and I'm a reviewer. This is what I do. I give my opinions on stuff so that people can then go on and make informed decisions about whether they want to purchase it for themselves, you know? I can do that stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and drag innocent people into this conversation who are just doing her course, taking her course, because that's not fair on them. I have made videos about Facebook groups before, but they were ones that featured people spreading really, really harmful misinformation, you know, things about like anti-vax people who drink and inject and, you know, bathe in their own urine and stuff like that. I'm not even joking. That feels different because I'm correcting the harmful misinformation, right? But in this case of Bethany's Facebook group, these are real women sharing intimate details of their sex lives and relationships, and I don't think it's my place to essentially infiltrate that and look in on their private conversations. I don't think it's my place to comment on that. I don't think it's even my place to see that, so I'm not going to. That's just a line that I'm drawing there. I don't think it's my place.
So session 1, God's beautiful design for your sexuality.
So finally, at 10 minutes into this first 40-minute video, Bethany finally starts talking about what this lesson is supposed to be about. God's design for sexuality.
Each one of us is coming to this course having experienced and having learned about and basically having viewed sex, intimacy, sexuality from a different perspective. Even if we all grew up in Christian homes, our view of sexuality is going to be a little bit different based on the messages we've heard, based on the experiences that we've had.
I was actually really, really impressed at first. You know, I thought this was great that she acknowledged it until she ruined it with the next line.
So it's really important to get back to like, what is God's design for sexuality and why did he create us this way? And what is a right view of sexuality?
This is so harmful. This idea that there's only one right way to view sexuality or to express your sexuality or anything like that. Like, it's really, really harmful and dangerous. And honestly, this is the premise of the entire course, and why the entire course is kind of underpinned by a dangerous ideology, essentially. It all comes back to this idea that Bethany has, that there's only one right way to view sexuality and sex and intimacy. And if you do it the wrong way, if you do it differently to the way that Bethany portrays in this video, then you're a sinner, a dirty, dirty sinner. And she keeps coming back to this throughout the entire video series. She'll be like, oh, so-and-so's okay within the confines of marriage. Everything's okay within the confines of marriage. You know, God has designed us to like all experience sexuality in different ways and this, but only in the confines of one man, one woman in marriage. Again, quite harmful. I don't think I need to say this to you guys watching, but I will anyway, because, you know, it's worth reiterating. There is absolutely no one right way to approach and view and understand sexuality. It is a very, very personal thing. It is something that is unique to everyone. Different people will want and like and need different things. Different people will be attracted to different people. Different people will experience different levels of attraction, differing sex drives, from hypersexuality to absolutely nothing at all, you know? It's a spectrum in every sense of the word. It's multiple spectrums, and that's all okay. There is no one right way. The only hard and fast rule, if you want to call it that I can see there being, would be for me around consent and how everyone needs to understand consent completely. What it is, how to give it, how to hear it, and so on. But other than that, it's all good. Do what you need. Also, why is there a lorry outside? I don't know if the mic's picking that up, but it's very annoying. Okay, it stopped. Yes, the point is, Bethany is wrong. There's no one right way to view or approach sexuality. Please do not internalize her message at all. That said, there are some bits that, again, she is kind of right on and that are good. This course isn't just completely bad. There are some good points to it.
But I think about it and I think, okay, some of us grew up in the midst of purity culture and sex was spoken of as a really bad thing, like bad. And then you got married and it's like, all right, party time, go time, turn it on. I am really struggling to view sensuality and sexuality in a really beautiful, positive, amazing light. And so that can be a place that some of us are coming from, which we know sex is not bad.
I raised a lot of these issues in my video, The Saga of Bethany Beal, and I do think it's great how Bethany is starting to grow and mature and her ideas are evolving, and I think it's great that now she can acknowledge that purity culture can be really harmful and that she grew up in purity culture and it harmed her. Like, that's a great thing to acknowledge and we really do need to commend her for that. Brilliant. But it's annoying still that she can't realise how much she has contributed to this in the past and continues to contribute to it. By shaming all sex outside her idea of what marriage is, Bethany is still promoting purity culture and is still causing damage to so many people. It's really difficult because on the one hand, she's showing some growth and starting to kind of break down these harmful ideas, but on the other, she's still perpetuating so many of them. I actually discussed this on a podcast recently with Oates, so we're doing this is going to sound random, we're doing a Gilmore Girls rewatch and discussing it episode by episode on a podcast. And in the episode 3 one that we filmed, in the kind of like introductory preamble bit, we actually spoke about this video that I'm making and we're discussing things. And Elise asked me something like, do we ever think she can be redeemed? Like, let's say she does deconstruct or, starts putting out more helpful content. Like, can she ever be redeemed? Is she ever going to be a good person? That sort of thing. Like, go watch that podcast if you want to see that discussion, because it was an interesting one. Anyway, Bethany then goes on to talk about how all sex, including sex within marriage, is marred by sexual sin, and we all experience sexual brokenness. And
the point is that we're all coming to marriage from a different perspective, a different set of beliefs. And so the problem is that sexual brokenness really does impact all of us. Whether we are a teen to, single to married couples, sexual brokenness, which means, at the fall when sin entered the world, everything was marred by sin, and sexuality and the sex even within marriage is marred by that.
At this point, like, my notes literally say, careful, Bethany. Remember the last time you and your sister used that phrase? When you called a rape victim sexually broken? Yeah. If you don't remember that, here it is.
I've done things with my boyfriends in the past with and without consent. First thing I want to say to you and to any of us who have experienced sexual impurity, which that's me, that's you,
that's everyone.
None of us are perfectly pure. And that's the whole point of why Christ died. Yeah. We are all sexually broken. We're all impure. We all struggle with lust. We all sin and need to repent of that sin before God.
It's different ways.
It's just in different ways, different situations, different seasons, different sin. But at the heart of it, we are all impure. And that is exactly why Christ died.
She then goes on to tell us, the viewers, that if we're disappointed by sex, then it's probably because we're not holy enough. Great, I guess. And then, at the halfway point through this first session, she warns us that we probably won't be wowed by this first lesson. Really keeping our expectations on the floor, Bethany.
And so my goal during this session right here is to offer some biblical insight and some hope that we can carry with us into the next few sessions. So your mind is probably not going to be blown in this session. You're probably not going to walk away with like, oh my goodness, I learned this great new move, or I'm feeling really spicy, but that's okay. I really encourage you to hunker down and make sure that you are paying attention, because without this foundation, kind of the rest of everything else we're going to learn is not going to be as helpful.
And again, you're really not selling this to me, Bethany. If you don't believe your course is offering that much value, then why should I? If you can sit there and say, hey, this lesson, you're not going to learn that much. You're not going to be that impressed. Oh, it's useful in one sense, but it's not really giving you that much. Like, why didn't you change it so it was giving people more value? You're making this course. You have the power to change that. When you're asking people to pay for something, you should be giving them value at every opportunity, Can you imagine if TV shows did this and they have a 10-episode TV series and in episode 1 absolutely nothing happens, but halfway through the main actor pops up and is like, hey, we know this episode's boring, but something might happen in episode 10 if you keep watching, okay? Yeah. No, if you don't think this lesson is wowing people and offering much value, either cut it and take the one important bit you think is in there and put it in another lesson, or change this lesson so you're covering more stuff that does have value and that is going to impress your viewers that have paid to watch this. I don't know if you guys know this, but before I was a YouTuber, I actually worked in digital marketing, and my degree is actually in business management with a focus on marketing. So the business side of this, the marketing side of this, the consumer value side of this, it bothers me to my core. Bethany is basically doing everything we are told not to do in any basic marketing course. That said, she follows this up with some really good questions that she wants to get the viewers to ask themselves.
What connections do you make that kind of offer some insight into how you view sex and intimacy today? If you think back to some of the key points that shaped you, what were they?
I have no complaints about this. I think it's great. Yeah, do get people to ask these things and think about them for themselves. Brilliant. I actually think this whole course would have benefited from more moments like this and making the moments like this more prominent. The ones where Bethany specifically speaks to the viewer and says, hey, I want you to answer this and this and this. I want you to think about this for yourself. I'm going to pose you these questions. And if she wants a little workbook, have sections in the workbook where they can fill certain stuff in and, think about it for themselves, That would have been so much better than this one little throwaway line here.
Both genders are created sexual by design. So the man is not more sexual and the woman is not less sexual. The woman is not more sexual and the man is less sexual. Like, God created us both to be sexual by his good design. And so we need to remember that, like, God created you. God created you as a sexual being on purpose and for a good purpose. You have to believe that.
Yeah, again, I really like this segment in a way because I think traditionally a lot of people have pushed this whole man wants sex, woman have to take it angle. So it's great that Bethany is now pushing back against that. I think that's really, really good progress. I think it's an important thing to include, but I do think there's a lot of stuff she's missing. Like, I think it's important for her to acknowledge that not all people are as sexual as each other and that it's okay for different people to have different sex drives. I think it's also important to acknowledge things like how asexual people exist and that that's completely normal and okay, and that once you have kind of realized that you might be asexual, maybe you just need to take a different approach to things than other people. I think she's missing out on a lot by not including those talking points and potentially excluding a lot of viewers, which is a shame.
Genesis 1:27 says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And although we as modern women live in a different time and era than Adam and Eve, we are very much like them. Like, we are just as sexual as our great-great-great-great-great-grandmother Eve because God designed us to be that way.
I also want you to notice here how Bethany is already starting with her God created one man and one woman thing, and then quoting the Bible and a bunch of stuff like that. This is the stuff that she normally starts spouting before she goes on one of her homophobic and or transphobic rants. So that's a big problem. Really, really bothered me. I don't like it. The thing is, this course isn't inclusive at all, right? And honestly, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. If you do just want to create a sex course for straight, cis women, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can be as niche as you want, as long as you still respectfully acknowledge that other genders and sexualities exist. And that even within that group of cis, hetero women, there are going to be differences between them, But Bethany, her content isn't a problem because it's targeting cis straight women. Her content is a problem because she takes a stance of this is the only right way to do things and all of the sex is bad and shameful, and that really is harmful even for those in her target audience. Honestly, one thing I expected to see in this course was Bethany doing a thing on how to deal with same-sex attraction, that sort of thing, and I was worried she would do a kind of push down those feelings and just marry a man sort of thing. But thankfully she didn't, which I'm really, really glad for. She could have gone full on homophobic and she chose not to, thankfully. So, maybe we are seeing a little bit of progress in her. I'm not sure.
God delights to see his children experience pleasure, that he delights to see us in oneness with our spouse.
Please never say that sentence again.
So God uses a very specific Hebrew word throughout the Bible to help us understand his intimate love for us. And some of you might know it. That Hebrew word is yada. Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You have yada'd me. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows that deep knowing. My soul yada's it very well. No, yada, that deep knowing. No, yada, that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us and we are his people.
There's so many segments like this that just go on, and it's just Bethany rambling for a long time. And she really is just saying a whole lot of nothing, isn't she? A lot of words without saying much.
Has good sex become an idol in my life? Has having an orgasm or multiple or becoming orgasmic, does that become an idol in my life?
Well, That is a sentence I never thought I would hear. Honestly, I could have done without it too.
Help me. I want to know you. I want that deep knowing that yada. I want to be known and I want you to know me because I know at your right hand are pleasures forever more. Please help me to know you. Like that has got to be the foundation. That has to be the cry. The word yada in the Bible in a sexual way. Genesis 24:16 says, and the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known yada her.
Okay, I have to admit, I kind of laughed at this bit. No man had yada'd her.
The best, most satisfying sex happens when there is that deep knowing of one another. That is when like it's all that God created it to be. Like that is the most beautiful sex.
Okay, I found this an interesting statement because how do you know this, Bethany? You've been with one man for a handful of years, no one else. You've not had multiple types of sex yourself. So how do you know that this is the most satisfying when you've not had any other experiences to compare it to? And now I'm not saying you need to have experienced everything to talk about it, but also she's not studied this. She's not read other studies about what kind of sex is actually most satisfying for other people. She's got no data to back up her claim. She's got no personal experience to back up her claim. She's just making it up and presenting it as fact because it fits her narrative. That's it. You know, actual studies have been done looking at what makes people the most satisfied sexually, and knowing each other like God isn't even on the list. Most studies find that a strong emotional bond isn't even in the top 3 things that make people most satisfied by sex. Instead, the top 3 tend to be good communication, setting the mood beforehand, and varied sexual experiences. This means that within these boundaries, you can have really satisfying sex with a long-term partner, or a short-term partner, or a one-off partner, or multiple partners, you know? But these are things that tend to leave people most sexually satisfied across the board, you know? But this is what the science says, this is what the studies say, but it doesn't fit Bethany's narrative, does it? So she ignores it. She doesn't speak about it. And then a fly hits her in the face. I can't believe I have to say this stuff.
Getting the job done, or we want something to get the job done for us. Okay. Huge fly in my eye. Actually, it's very small. God created sex to thrive in an environment of true love.
Oh my God, again, why keep this in? Editing is your friend. Can you imagine if you'd have had to sit here with me for the full 3 minutes while that lorry beeped outside my window a few minutes ago and I'd just been like, yeah, I'll be doing it in a few minutes, guys. Sorry, just gonna check my phone. Bear with. Like, no, this is why you edit. For God's sake. I don't think she actually cares about her audience that much. She doesn't understand what appeals to a viewer. She doesn't understand how to best present information to people. She doesn't understand how people best learn and pick up on information. No. She then quotes the girl-defined book, Sex, Purity, and the Longings of a Girl's Heart, which she also tries to sell in her workbook. But what I found super interesting, and I'm not sure if this was like a little Freudian slip or something, but Bethany refers to this book as Kristen's book. Kristen being her sister who runs Girl Defined with her. She refers to this as Kristen's book and not their book that they apparently wrote together. That was interesting.
It is crucial to invite God into your sex life. I know that sounds weird and that sounds awkward.
Yeah, that does sound weird. I'll be honest.
He invented sex, penis and vagina.
Oh, just another reminder that people are paying for this. Seriously. Oh. And then she ends this lesson by saying, basically, like, I don't want you worrying about your husband and how he should grow. Let's focus on you and how you need to grow. And blah, 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 blah. I can't tell if this is good advice or not. On the one hand, yeah, you can't and shouldn't try to change others. And it's really good to focus on yourself and the things you can change about yourself and improve about yourself, right? But on the other hand, this also feels a lot like, A, just ignore your partner's needs, and B, you're the one with the problem, not him. Don't try and blame the man. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to think of this. I don't quite get what she's trying to say. Bethany is not a very good communicator.
I have grown so much in ways I didn't even know I needed to. Specifically, I think discovering the beauty of how God made me as an erotic, sensual woman.
Kyra, can you come pick me up? I don't feel safe and I want to go home. She then ends this lesson by telling us how much she's learnt very, very recently while making the course, and call me crazy, but surely a person should be knowledgeable in a field before they start teaching it to others, right? And charging other people for that teaching too. I don't know. Okay, next lesson, session, whatever you want to call it. This is session 2, The Depths of Female Pleasure with Bonnie Burns, who I kept wanting to say Bobby Burns in my head. It's very annoying when I was writing the script.
Hi, Bonnie. Thank you so much for joining the Ultimate Sex Course for Christian Women. You have no idea how excited I've been for this conversation. But for the women who don't know you, who haven't read your book, Unlock Your Orgasm, which is a must read if they're watching this, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space about talking about intimacy and sex and orgasm?
Absolutely. So a little bit about me is my name is Bonnie Burns. I live in East Tennessee. I've been married 37 years to a man who has done some incredible work. We have 3 adult sons, and I write, research, and talk about healthy, godly sexual intimacy on the podcast Sex Chat for Christian Wives.
Okay, so the sessions or lessons like this are the bulk of the course. And they're just like basically 30-minute Zoom interviews, right? Bethany just sits there with her greasy hair, nodding, drinking, playing with her baby, while these people just kind of talk at her and she just, and her eyes glaze over, right? Again, people are paying for this. She could have put some effort in, but no. If these were just free podcasts on YouTube, then fine, no problem. I wouldn't be so snarky about it. But you're selling this as a course. You're charging people money for this. You're claiming that people can, like, learn about, she's calling this the ultimate sex course. And it's just this. Is this the best she can really offer? Because it's not good enough. So this lesson centers around this woman, Bobby Burns, who is a Christian counselor, and I think you know how I feel about them. So Bethany starts by asking why so many women feel awkward about sex while her baby squeaks and cries, and it's very distracting. And again, she's charging for this. I'll keep saying it.
Wow, that's amazing. And, I know a lot of women are just uncomfortable even hearing you say the word orgasm, or like, what? She wrote a book called Unlock Your Orgasm. What is this all about? I just feel awkward even talking about this or thinking about this. Why do you think that so many women who are getting married and who want to experience pleasure, who want to have a good sexual relationship with their spouse, why do you think that there is so much like awkwardness and there's our little sister. Why do you think that there is so much uncomfortable awkwardness surrounding the topic of sex, even for married women?
And interestingly, again, Bonnie, but oh, for God's sake, see? Bonnie calls out purity culture, which again, I'm thankful for. This is great. It's good to see some progress. So yeah, I do think that's good, and I have very few complaints here. Fine, great, appreciate that.
Oh, several reasons. I think culturally, within the Christian culture, of course, there's been the purity movement, which, had a disordered look at sexuality.
This next bit, though, I found quite revealing.
I mean, I relate to that so much. I came from a wonderful Christian home, but sex was definitely not something that was talked about. And I think I am making my entire family uncomfortable with the fact that I'm having these conversations and talking about this even now, and I've, heard comments here and there from, different members of my family, like, should she really be talking about this stuff? Mm-hmm.
We say that a lot on my other podcast, sex is for you too.
Yeah. I did not understand that like at all when I got married. And I know a lot of women, because I've shared about this on my Instagram, and a lot of women were like, yes, I feel the same way. I 100% thought, any pleasure that I am experiencing kind of needs to be like come from him. And I'm just kind of this person that kind of is these almost like dead bones. I call them like dead bones. Like I'm just kind of there, kind of, okay, now make it happen. And that didn't work well, if you can imagine.
Now, Bethany has spoken about this stuff before, hasn't she? In Instagram stories and videos and podcasts and stuff like that. We covered a lot of it in her, in my Saga of Bethany Beal video, which if you haven't seen it, it's like a massive, huge, long, deep dive into the evolution of Bethany's content across the internet over the last however many years. And what's really interesting is in that video, I compiled all this stuff that she'd done to like promote this sex course, podcasts she'd been on, stuff she'd made before, and honestly, it's all the same stuff she's selling in this course. There is no new information in this course at all. I'm not entirely sure what she's charging for, because everything she says you can already get for free from her online.
And later on, I learned more like, oh, I actually have to take some responsibility for my pleasure. And he is, like you said, he doesn't give me an orgasm. That's something I surrender to. When you say surrender to your orgasm, what does that mean?
It is. So learning to surrender your orgasm is a little like playing a violin. It takes practice. Sex was created for community, to build community with family. I had an epiphany the other day about being in your body and how our bodies are just as important as our spiritual, emotional thoughts and prayers, because Jesus' sacrifice wouldn't have been possible without his body.
At this point, my notes just said, what am I doing with my life? That sums up a lot of how I felt while making this video.
Trying to figure out and pinpoint what pleasure feels like for you. And I will say, this starts outside of the bedroom. This starts with connecting with your husband so that you're relaxed in his presence.
I thought this bit was actually great advice until this next line.
He's not going to be perfect. A lot of guys do have problems emotionally connecting. It's a process. It's like playing the violin. You learn slowly.
Like, what an odd, harmful stereotype to push here. And this is a theme you'll see throughout this video series, this course. It's also a really outdated stereotype, isn't it? And, you know, this is another reason that we need feminism. So we can get rid of this toxic idea that men don't have feelings, men don't have emotions, men can't connect with people properly. That idea that men just need to be stoic all the time and they can't express themselves. I hate it. It's harmful. It's untrue. It's damaging to men. Can we stop pushing this really dangerous narrative, please? This is one of the reasons that men have such awful mental health problems, because when they do express emotions, they're not taken seriously. And the rest of the time, they're told to suppress them and keep them down. And that's what leads to such high rates of male suicide. It's a real problem. And like I say, this is something that you see recurring throughout the course. Even the one male speaker on this course seems to have some sort of disdain for men, you know? There's a lot of, not so much belittling men, but like underestimating them and misunderstanding them. And it's all very sad. You'll see me address it at various points throughout this video. But there's a lot of like, men can't do this, men shouldn't do this, men, like, it's bad. It's really bad. Bethany then reveals that she didn't know anything really about basic female anatomy until she read this woman, Bonnie's book, when Bethany was in her 30s.
As I was digging into your book, Unlock Your Orgasm, I was realizing so much just in the beginning, all of the anatomy. As much as I've read and like listened to podcasts and researched this, I still was learning so much about what is actually happening. So there's that kind of like educational aspect of it.
What's annoying though is that Bethany mentions stuff like, oh, you know, women should know basic anatomy. It's important. We should understand how our reproductive systems work, all that sort of thing. But she never bothers to actually explain it to her viewer. She tells us what we should know, but she never teaches us those things. Does that make sense? So this course gives us like a list of titles of like, you should know what your anatomy is. You should know what an orgasm is. You should know how to have an orgasm. You should know how to communicate with your partner. But it doesn't tell us what those things are. It doesn't teach us how to learn that stuff. It doesn't give us any advice for learning it. It doesn't give us any real resources for learning in the course, you know? This was a complaint I had throughout writing this entire script, right? I'd be like, okay, Bethany brings up a great topic and then doesn't teach it. And I realised while editing the script that it's because Bethany doesn't have a formal education, does she? She doesn't understand what a good education looks like. She doesn't know what a good course is. She doesn't know Well, she doesn't have an experience of being taught stuff, so how is she supposed to know how to teach other people, you know? It's very, very clear to me that Bethany doesn't know the content she should be teaching. She doesn't know how to teach. She doesn't know how to structure either individual lessons or a whole course. She doesn't understand how using exercises and questions can be effective learning tools. There's so much missing, and I get it, it's hard. Not everyone has those skills, right? Understanding how to educate others is a skill in itself, and it's one that people spend years learning how to do and studying it for themselves. But since Bethany doesn't have this skill, she shouldn't be charging people for it, you know? This course lacks any substance. It would be like me, for example, let's pick something I don't know about, like sport, right? It would be like me creating a course out of nowhere called the Ultimate Football Course for Secular Women. I know. And then I put this course together, and it's just like a bunch of people saying, oh yeah, to really understand football, you need to understand the scoring mechanisms, you need to understand the rules, you need to wear shoes. There's a reason that people tie their hair up when they play football, but they're never explaining any of that stuff. Never saying, well, what are the rules? What are the diameters of a football pitch? What are the special shoes people wear? What is a football made of? What are the techniques people use? What are the, like, never actually saying those things. Does that make sense? There's a lot of Bethany listing stuff here, but no actual substance. But back to the anatomy and physiology side of things. This is basic information that everyone should be taught. And not just women and girls and people with a female reproductive system, but everyone should be taught, right? And I would say they should be taught in their young teen years or as kids, because it's important for all humans to understand how theirs and other people's bodies work and how to look after them, you know? And if this is something that you're not quite aware of yourself, you don't really understand how reproductive systems work and the different names of the body parts and stuff like that, I'm not entirely sure how much I can speak about on YouTube safely without getting in trouble. So I've left a link in the video description with like basically a document of resources, and there's some articles on there, there's some blog posts on there, and there's lots and lots of books that you can get to teach you this stuff for yourself, which will fill in the gaping holes of knowledge that Bethany has left in this course.
I think the best practice, especially if you're married, I'm assuming everyone listening is probably married.
Yeah.
Oh God, guys, I think she's called me out, okay? Don't tell her I'm here and I'm not married. Then Bethany and Bonnie are going to talk about masturbation without ever saying the word masturbation. Apparently you need to explain to your husband that if you masturbate, it's not a coping mechanism. I'm not escaping anything. Just an odd thing to say, right?
The best practice is to communicate with your husband that this is what I want to do in order to enhance our time together. This is not a coping mechanism. I am not doing this because I'm escaping from anything.
She then says that she doesn't think God would frown upon masturbation if it's with the goal to make sex better for your husband, which is interesting because a lot of fundies are actually just fundamentally against it. Always bad, wrong, you know. I'm pretty sure that Kristen and Bethany have spoke about the dangers of masturbation before and all that stuff. And in fact, Kristen, Bethany's sister, who runs Girl Defined with her, she's actually written and spoken about before a lot of her own struggles with masturbation. So it's interesting to see how Bethany's suddenly okay with it and promoting it if you do it when you're married, you know? But I guess, like anything else, it's only bad if you're doing it because you enjoy it or you're single, you know? But if you're doing it for your husband, for someone else, that's okay, that's fine. Ridiculous. Then they go on to try and like explain orgasms without ever really saying what an orgasm is, and a lot of it feels like these women are like afraid to say naughty words, and they're like little schoolgirls giggling about it, you know, like in the back of a class, like, oh my god. They literally use phrases like clitoral button, and instead of erection, as he grows rigid with blood.
So the male penis, all of his orgasmic material is on the glands, you know, the head of the penis.
Yeah.
In a female, we see the clitoral button as you see a male penis growing rigid with
Yeah.
his erectile tissue filling with blood.
Again, this is not at all what I would expect from a legitimate sex course. Why not actually give a biology lesson? Why not show some diagrams? Why not explain this stuff in a way that is actually helpful and professional? You can say words in a completely educational way like masturbation, erection, penis. Like, these are all words that it's absolutely okay to say. They're not dirty words. They're not shameful or sinful. They're not things to giggle about. They're just words, you know? And if you want to talk about orgasm so much, then, you know, get scientific with it. Tell me about the studies that have been done into it. Tell me about how we understand what an orgasm is. Tell me about what happens. They often use phrases like, oh, it's like a sneeze. It's muscle contractions and that sort of thing. I'm like, great, cool. Now give me some more detail, you know? That's what I think people will, who, you know, the kind of people who are watching this course genuinely, I think that's what they actually need to hear and know and all of that. Again, if you'd like to actually read about the technical side of that stuff, I've got some recommendations for you down in that resource document. Bethany then asks, and I wish I hadn't heard this.
You're like, okay, I just want to make this happen. Like, I just want to have an orgasm and I'm working so hard on it. And so like this exact scenario, you're working hard on it. You know, you're trying to do all of the things, but you start to feel like your genitals are literally turning raw, like raw meat, because there's so much rubbing and it starts to become painful. And you just, you know, like, where did you go wrong? What's going on? And that I've heard that scenario over and over again, where we've tried so hard and it's literally going on like 2 hours and there's just, it's just painful now. Like it's raw meat down there. So what's happening? What's going on? How can we like fix this?
You're really telling on yourself and Dave, aren't you? I didn't need to hear this, Bethany. But also, I'm sorry you experienced that. I am so sorry. There's more messed up and unprofessional moments and lots of awkward silences, lots of them talking over each other. Ugh.
Orgasm is a perk, but it's not the goal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
now,
I
if a
just say
woman
give
is
her
saying,
space.
yeah,
Gently support
do you,
her, but don't say things like, oh, you have to know what feels good.
yeah,
She doesn't.
And then we get this question.
What resource would you recommend for a woman who's saying, okay, I want my husband to learn along with me. I just feel like he doesn't exactly know, you know, how to bring me pleasure. So there's obviously communication between the two of them, but are there any specific resources that you would recommend for the husband specifically to dig into to learn how to better help his wife, you know, experience more pleasure?
Weirdly, Bonnie gives the advice that if men are suffering from a pornography addiction, then they shouldn't seek out educational resources on how to please their wives.
So we do have husbands listen to Sex Chat for Christian Wives all the time. So unless he would be triggered or he's in recovery from pornography and it might not be safe for him to listen, I would absolutely recommend that they listen for a few. I think we even have some webinars, and one is on orgasm.
And this is insane to me, because how can they not differentiate between sexually stimulating content and educational content around sex?
What would be your best advice for the newlywed couple or the couple that's in their first 5 years? Is there anything that you can share with us that would just help maybe to, you know, avoid some of the, I don't know, pain and heartache that can come in those first few years, or ways to set us up for more success?
I can't help but think that Bethany is just using this course as an excuse to ask for help about her own marriage. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay, Bethany. I know you're having trouble. I know you're having problems. I know you're not satisfied. And you're on this journey to learn more, and that is great for you. But did you need to sell it? Apparently the advice to have better sex is to sit down and talk about chores and finances. Seriously though, basically the whole crux of this is that you need to be comfortable with someone to have good sex with them, and that is good advice. But it's not exactly groundbreaking, is it? This isn't worth paying for. This should just be a basic fact that people are taught in general. Bethany then asks, what about the women who say their marriage isn't a safe space? And luckily doesn't follow it up by calling these people broken this time, so that's progress, I get. Bonnie's advice is to just go watch her other podcast, so she doesn't give any actual advice here. Like, this is a really good, important question, so why aren't they answering it? Why is she deciding, oh, you know what, I'll just upsell my other stuff, you know? Get people to go and watch my other things. Go and get people to do this and this and this, instead of putting the information that they need to hear here, where they've paid for it. I swear this course is just like one big 8-hour-long advertisement for other people's stuff. And if you don't believe me, just wait till the end of the video. Thankfully though, she ends this whole little rant segment thing by saying that it is okay to say no to sex, which would be great if she didn't add the next little caveat. She follows it up with, it's okay to say no to sex, at least until your husband is in recovery from sexual sin.
All those verses about submitting and those things, when a husband is in active sin, he's not loving you like Christ. And while you can be your best self, you can also say no to sex, because sex that is porn related, sex that is not an intimate experience also can be traumatizing. So I want to give you permission that you can say no to this until he's in recovery, or at least is showing progress and repentance and cooperation towards good recovery. I give her that permission.
So apparently you can only say no to your husband if he's currently sinning. If he's not, don't say no. You can't really. It's your duty, isn't it? This is dangerous and disgusting to tell people, and it's not okay. You do not need an excuse to say no to someone, whether you're married or not, regardless of gender or sexuality or anything else. You can always say no to someone at any time, in any circumstance, for any reason. That is okay. Honestly, I think one of the most disturbing things about this entire course is that, like I say, there's probably around 8 or so hours of footage, right? And I don't think the word consent is muttered once. How can you make a course about sex and not discuss consent? It is the most important aspect of it. There's more awkward silences, more selling of Bonnie's book and courses and other podcasts, and like, God. My notes initially said, ugh, I've paid to watch 30 minutes of ads, haven't I? So that's where this lesson ends, and that's another 36 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. To say this was supposed to be a lesson about female pleasure, they really didn't teach us anything, did they? Here's what I would have added in to, and I wouldn't have just listed these things, I have actually taught these things if I was making this course. Have an actual anatomy lesson for the female and male reproductive systems, There is some talk of the clitoris in this, but how about you actually explain to people what it is, where it's located, how to find it, how to touch it. There is kind of an attempt, but it feels muddy, it feels awkward, it's not really educational. What I want to see is them explaining it to their audience in clear, concise terms. This is what the clitoris is. This is where it is. This is how to find it. This is what it does. Simple, clear. I also think they should have talked about other areas where you can feel pleasure. Don't just cover, the female reproductive system, but also talk about other areas of the body. Talk about erogenous zones and how the focus shouldn't just be on the downstairs, but the whole body and the whole process. Talk about how different people like different things. Talk about how you would go about experimenting to find out what you like, different areas on people that you can touch, and how to do it all safely and carefully and without ever hurting anyone. I'd have thought they'd have wanted to give people actual techniques and advice for things to try if they want to orgasm, tell them things specifically like what kinds of lubrication to use, advice if they want to try using toys, give them fun little activities that the listener can try alone or with a partner to figure out what feels good for them. That's what I would expect to be in a lesson like this, but it wasn't. And of course, as I've said before, they should have explained exactly what an orgasm is and how it differs in men and women. But they didn't. You can absolutely teach people this stuff without it being smutty or dirty or unchristian. But as it stands, this lesson, this video is just unstructured, unorganized, unprofessional, and doesn't actually teach the listener anything. When I first wrote the script, I actually said in my notes, I don't know, maybe they'll touch more on this stuff in the next lesson, but spoiler, they don't. So let's move on to that next one. This is session 3, Making Sense of Orgasm with Dr. Jennifer Degler. I hope I'm saying that right. Now get ready for this one, because this one has even worse camera quality than the last one, and we have 50 whole minutes of this. I know. Bethany opens this one by calling Jennifer the orgasm lady. That's fun.
How did you come about talking about sex and really being an expert in this area?
Well, Bethany, no one, I think, on 6th grade career day says, "Oh, I want to talk about sex when I grow up." Nobody really has that as a career goal.
Yeah.
So I am a clinical psychologist, and I am also the co-director of the Christian Counseling Center, the Interfaith Counseling Center in Lexington, Kentucky. So
I think of you as, because I've heard you talk about sex, and then I've heard you share on podcasts specifically about like orgasm and pleasure and all that. So when I think of you, I'm like, oh, she's the orgasm and pleasure, lady. She's the professional on that. So you're making a name for yourself in that specific realm, for better or for worse.
And then Bethany reveals this information to us again.
But I remember the one specific area that I felt like I just couldn't get answers on, couldn't get help on. And when I would ask questions about it, it just felt like awkward. And even the married women who were really open seemed to become kind of quiet around this topic. And that is orgasm. And I felt very confused about orgasm for kind of like the first year or so of my marriage, like not knowing, like, have I had an orgasm? I'm not even sure I would know if I had one. And, trying to read books, it just felt kind of confusing. And honestly, I didn't know you. I didn't know a lot of these other resources that are out there.
And yeah, that's what lack of education does to people, Bethany. I get that Bethany is now trying to push back against this and educate people, but she's still doing it in a way that's like, you need to learn this stuff on someone else's schedule and within my religion's confines and boundaries. She's making this course for married women, not all women. So by the time most of them are watching this, it's kind of too little too late, I believe in educating people about stuff before they have to experience it for themselves. One of the best things I believe we can do for young people is to make sure they grow up being thoroughly educated about the situations they could find themselves in when they're older, so that when they reach that time, when they face these situations, they can make the best educated decision for themselves. They know how to think these things through. They know the pros and cons. They know themselves and what is best for them, and they can make those decisions safely and, I guess, accurately for themselves. This really is one of the biggest problems with purity culture. They stop people learning and experiencing stuff like this while they're single, and then throw them in at the deep end and go on, learn as you go, do it. Before then, not allowed to talk about it, not allowed to experience it. But once you're on my schedule and you've got married under these conditions and boundaries and, on what we say is okay, then you can do it. But by that point, you're already in too deep and you're forced to do it, and they're told, as married people, you have to do this and this and this and this. And yeah, that's pretty terrifying and damaging, isn't it? It's one of the reasons so many people end up with so much trauma.
What the heck is an orgasm? Like, is there an explanation? Give us the lowdown.
Oh my god, finally a good question from Bethany. Finally! Except it doesn't get answered. I mean, there's an answer. It's just not a good one.
Give us the lowdown.
Yeah. And, Bethany, one of the things that I think is so mysterious about orgasm is that it is something that's happening inside a person's body, and the outward expression of that can look really different.
At this point, like I say, Bethany and or Jennifer should be explained in detail exactly what an orgasm is, why and how it happens, the differences in orgasms between men and women, even in women, the different kinds of orgasm you can have, because depending on where is stimulated and how, you can have different kinds, right? Again, I'm not sure exactly how much I'm allowed to say on YouTube without being either blocked or demonetized or something, even though this is educational. But if you want to find out more about this stuff, again, please check out my resource list in the video description in your own time. There's lots down there that'll teach you tons about this stuff. They also talk a lot about the influence of porn and secular culture a lot.
And so, unfortunately, because of pornography and movies and what people see oftentimes is this very outward, loud, we're knocking chairs over, kind of orgasm. And then they're like, okay, but I didn't like want to knock chairs over. And so did it happen for me? And because we can't, even by viewing someone else having an orgasm, it doesn't communicate to us what actually happened inside their body.
But I do think that they're missing a huge point, Sure, films and porn can skew our ideas in negative ways. I'm not going to deny that. I personally do think there is a huge problem with a lot of the porn industry abusing women, violating women, women being degraded and mocked and not being in control of what they do. But honestly, that is not so much the cause of the problem, but a symptom of the bigger problem. The bigger issue is that female sexuality has been taboo for so long. Women's pleasure has been ignored and demonized, and that is a huge problem. And purity culture does have a part to play in that, but not the only part. In general, women have been viewed as objects for the use of men. Women have been told, both in and outside of religion, we need to sit back and take it. Our pleasure is not important. It's all about being used by the man. And that's the whole problem. That's why we have issues with things like violent pornography, right? And that's also why we have issues with purity culture causing trauma to so many women. You can't just blame pornography in general because, that in itself is neither a good nor bad thing. There are good and bad parts of it, but just the idea of pornography is neither good nor bad. There is so much pushback today with ethical pornography being made. A lot of it is made by women, for women, with women's safety and pleasure at the forefront. How is that a bad thing if no one's being exploited? And there's quite a feminist overtone to it, and it is about, sensuality and a celebration of the body and joy and pleasure and that sort of thing. You can't say all porn objectifies women when there is stuff out there that is actively working not to do that. So yeah, the violent stuff, the objectifying stuff, the problematic stuff is more of a symptom of a bigger problem with patriarchy and misogyny than it is a cause of it. Both need to be addressed, don't get me wrong, but I just think we need to be clear that there is a bigger overarching problem there. Bethany and Jennifer then go on to talk about how apparently the female orgasm has been a mystery for so long, and they put this down to the fact that it happens inside the body, so we don't understand it, which is an odd idea to me. We know plenty about internal bodily functions, so that isn't our barrier to why we don't know about it, why it's been a mystery for so long. The reason we don't know about it is because, like I say, there is a bigger problem in society where women's sexuality has been policed and oppressed. Women's pleasure has been overlooked and ignored on purpose. It's very, very true that in pretty much most things related to women's physiology and health and sexuality and experiences, we haven't had enough attention and we have been overlooked. There's plenty of examples of this even outside sex and orgasms and research into that. So let's look at some non-sex related inequalities for a second. There's a great book by Caroline Criado-Perez called Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, and it is a fantastic book. I thoroughly recommend it. And again, it's going to be listed down in my resource list if you want to check it out for yourself. So Perez in this book points out that women are often left out or underrepresented in so many medical trials, and this causes all kinds of long-term health problems for millions of women. One example she gives, she talks about, and I quote, "Another issue the authors completely failed to address is whether or not certain drugs were tested in women at different stages of their menstrual cycles. When women are included in trials at all, they tend to be tested in the early follicular phase, that's really hard to say, of their menstrual cycle, when hormone levels are at their lowest, i.e. when they are superficially most like men. Male researchers have had a ton of excuses for this, but we can't include women at these stages in their cycles, because we're trying to minimize the variables. We don't need estrogen and progesterone and interfering with our studies. But the truth is that in real life, we do have all these hormones fluctuating and changing, and so you do need to test in all these different circumstances. Perez says this herself in the book. She says, real life isn't a study, and in real life those pesky hormones will have an impact on outcomes. So far, menstrual cycle impacts have been found for antipsychotics, antihistamines, and antibiotic treatments, as well as heart medication. Some antidepressants have been found to affect women differently at different times in their cycles, meaning the dosage may be too high at some points and too low at others. So this lack of actual research into how women's fluctuating hormones affects the medication we take, or even how the medication affects our hormones and stuff like that, means that millions of women are being given the wrong medication at the wrong times, and it's putting our health at risk. Another example she gives is the following. Diagnostic tests developed around male bodies are also a problem in other medical disciplines, even those where women are more at risk. Women have a higher risk than men of developing right-sided colon cancer, which often develops more aggressively. But the fecal blood test commonly used to detect colon cancer is less sensitive in women than men. Meanwhile, because women have on average a longer, narrower colon than men, colonoscopies in women may be incomplete. Again, the average, the standard, is designed for men. So women are left behind, overlooked, and often misdiagnosed and don't get the treatment they need. Perez also discusses what is known as Yentl syndrome, which describes the phenomenon whereby women are misdiagnosed and poorly treated unless their symptoms or diseases conform to that of men. Women are also underdiagnosed for heart conditions and heart attacks, meaning that women are actually far more likely to die of heart attacks than men, simply because they're not identified as heart attacks when they're having them. In other areas, women's pain is not taken as seriously as men's, and this is even more true amongst women of colour. To quote Perez again, because seriously, that book is fantastic, African American women are 243% more likely than white women to die from pregnancy and childbirth related issues. And that is in America, the USA. And you still have women of colour dying in childbirth or having complications related to pregnancy at a disgustingly high rate. Other examples. Heart disease and stroke are the leading causes of death for all American women, but the majority of people dying are black women, with more than 60% living with some form of heart complication. Studies find that compared to white patients, black patients are 40% less likely to receive medication to ease acute pain, and Hispanic patients are 25% less likely. This is a systemic problem with probably unconscious racism and misogyny. Let's not pretend like, oh, people are targeting them on purpose. No, it's probably unconscious racism. It's probably unconscious misogyny, but it's still there. It's a systemic problem that needs addressing because it is putting the lives of women, especially women of colour, at risk, and that is not acceptable. These are quite extreme examples which relate to serious health conditions, but there are other examples too for less serious things, if you want to put it like that. Take, for example, cisgender women and trans men who suffer from, and non-binary people, who suffer from bad period pain, for example, right? Bad period pain is incredibly common in so many of us. It's something that I've been open about speaking about before because, oh my god, it's hell. Once a month, my body is just in debilitating pain, you know? At least one day out of every month, if not more, I have to spend it curled up in bed with tears in my eyes, running to the loo every now and again to throw up from the pain. It is that bad. And yes, I've seen doctors about it, and no, they don't know what the cause is or how to help me other than telling me, oh, just keep taking ibuprofen. Yeah. Helpful, thanks. And I am not the only person who suffers like this. There is so little research into helping women with awful period pain because the funding just isn't there. It's not seen as important. So let me tell you a little story here, right? In the early 1990s, a little drug called sildenafil citrate was being tested as a heart disease medication, except it was only being tested on men. It wasn't really found necessarily to help the heart, but it was found useful for something else, which I'll share in a moment. This other use was studied in way more depth, it gained a lot of funding, and the drug was approved for use, and today it's incredibly common. Many men are prescribed this drug because the funding was there for it. It was deemed a necessary issue to study, it got funded, it got approved, men have this medication now. Thing is, in 2013, a doctor called Richard Legro decided this drug should be tested on women too, because of course it should, right? So, and I quote, a small double-blind randomized controlled trial of sildenafil citrate found that it offered total pain relief from period pain over 4 consecutive hours with no observed adverse effects. Amazing, right? Like, surely that deserves looking at further. This could change women's lives. This is brilliant. Except no, they didn't get to study it any further because their funding was cut because it wasn't deemed necessary. The doctor who led this study knew that this could change the life of millions of people, and he kept applying for funding only to be rejected multiple times because, and I quote, they did not see dysmenorrhea, which is the technical term for period pain, as a priority public health issue. Period pain is apparently not important enough to receive funding to try and stop it, apparently. But remember, this drug already had trials funded for a different problem, one which apparently was a public health priority, one which was necessary apparently, one which deserved funding. And you know what that issue was? Erectile dysfunction. This drug today is more commonly known as Viagra. Viagra could be fantastic for stopping period pain in women and letting us actually get on with our lives. But no, they won't fund it. They'll fund studies into erectile dysfunction, but they won't fund studies into stopping period pain. Apparently, erections are more important than women being pain-free. Think about that for a second. And again, this is just one example of many of women's issues being overlooked, ignored, and forgotten about in the medical field. And again, to bring this back to the original topic of sex and orgasms, this is also why the female orgasm has remained a mystery for so long. Because honestly, it is mostly men running these studies. And like everything else, they prioritize men's orgasms, men's pleasures, men's sexual experiences over women. It's not because orgasms happen inside so we don't really understand it. It's because men have always been prioritized over women, and that's not okay. Now, of course, we are understanding it a lot more. There are more studies being done into it, but that's because women are finally pushing back and standing up for ourselves. That's because feminists have come in and said, hey, our health is important, our sexuality is important, and our pleasure is important. It is thanks to feminists that we know any of this stuff that Bethany is talking about today, and yet she won't acknowledge it. She still remains staunchly anti-feminist. Bethany is here actively trying to fight back against something which has been caused and perpetuated by patriarchal power structures, but she still refuses to acknowledge that it's caused by patriarchal power structures. She still refuses to call herself a feminist and acknowledge the good that feminists have done, even when she herself is actively benefiting from feminism. It is frustrating as hell. Bit of a rant there, sorry. I get very passionate about this stuff. Let's look back at Bethany and Jennifer's video. Here's where they explain in absolutely no detail whatsoever what an orgasm is.
And so an orgasm is very, very rapid muscular contractions. There are feelings of pleasure. And so an orgasm is this building up of muscular tension that then releases into these very, very fast contractions of these muscles. You know, men, when it comes to their orgasms, they tend to be kind of like vanilla. It's vanilla ice cream, vanilla ice cream, vanilla ice cream. You know, in your 20s, that is actually, the younger you are, the harder it is for your body to orgasm.
Why is that?
So, I'm not 100% sure why that is.
Yeah.
You know,
And oh, for God's sake. She doesn't know. They're teaching a course and they don't know. Oh my God. Okay, right.
at what age does a woman reach her sexual peak? And almost everybody knows this statistic. What would you guess it is?
I've heard it's like in your 40s, or maybe it's older. I don't know. Somewhere older than what I am.
Somewhere in your 30s, like mid
30s. Okay.
And
hey, I'm 34. This is perfect.
So you are peaking. Probably this very moment, Bethany. And what age have you heard a man reaches his sexual peak?
In his 20s?
Right. What that means is the time from first stimulation to orgasm. So an 18-year-old boy, from the time of first stimulation to when he ejaculates and orgasms, that may be about 90 to 120 seconds. I don't call that a sexual peak. I call that premature ejaculation.
Got it.
So, but for women, the time from first stimulation to orgasm, actually, as she goes well into her 30s, that time gets shorter and shorter for her.
Interesting.
There's so much to unpack here. That apparently it's physiologically, biologically harder for women in their 20s to orgasm. She's talking out of her bum. I looked this up, I did so much research, I can't find anything to back this up at all. Now, there are studies that suggest that as a woman becomes more sexually experienced, which is something that does happen over time as she gets older, then she'll find it easier to orgasm because she knows what she likes. She's more confident, she's more relaxed, and so on. But that has to do with experience, not age. The age is just kind of a coincidence, you know? There's no evidence I could find to suggest that it is physically or biologically harder for women in their 20s to orgasm. It all comes down to experience and confidence and comfort, you know? So a woman who becomes sexually active at 18 is going to kind of like have better orgasms when she's 30 than she did at 18, most likely. But a woman who becomes sexually active in her 30s is going to have better orgasms in her 40s and her 30s, right? That's fair. But out of those two women, when they're both in their 30s, the one with the experience is going to have the better orgasms than the one, and find it easier to orgasm than the one who's just become sexually active, right? Because it's not actually to do with age, it's to do with experience. Does that make sense? If we do want to talk about biological and physiological differences with age, though, then there is evidence to suggest, studies have been done to suggest that as you get older, your orgasms may get less intense, at least for some people. And this simply has to do with things like nerve endings of weakening around the clitoris and things like that. Nerve endings around there becoming less sensitive over time, muscles in the vagina weakening due to age or having a lot of children and giving birth and that sort of thing. You also have to consider that things like fluctuating hormone levels over time will affect things like your libido and how kind of relaxed you are, how much you want sex, how, that can also affect how confident you are, and that will also affect your orgasms. Studies have also found that low levels of estrogen, which normally happen when a woman reaches menopause, that can lead to a higher chance of pain during sex, decrease in blood flow, reduction in tissue elasticity, and reduction in vaginal lubrication, all of which make orgasm more difficult. So basically, Jennifer is straight up wrong and talking out of her bumhole. Now, let's also talk about this idea of a sexual peak, because this is far more complicated than Jennifer makes out. Her definition that it's just about how quickly you orgasm is incomplete and inaccurate. That's not generally what it's referring to. Instead, when people say they're studying a sexual peak, it generally is more about the period in your life, and this is a quote from a study, a period in your life when you are most capable of having frequent sex that is high in quality. That is how a sexual peak is generally defined. Now, the ages that Jennifer and Bethany gave, they're not too inaccurate. That's, not so bad. So most people who have studied this stuff and, discussed it understand that, there's this idea that men peak in their early 20s, women in their late 30s. But they also understand that this is less to do with actual biological or physiological differences and more to do with social pressure and expectations, right? So there's this article by this guy, I think he has a PhD, called Poonam Sachdev. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. They highlight this very, very simply by saying, the statistics may reflect how often most young men can achieve orgasm with or without a partner. Many women may require more skilled partners or more experience of their own to achieve orgasm. Many women aren't adept at communicating their needs to their partner until they have gained some sexual experience. They may be older before they have regular orgasms during shared sex. That's the reason for the difference, not so much biology. However, if we do look at biological difference, let's talk about hormone levels. In some men, testosterone levels start to decrease in their early 20s, while for most women, their estrogen levels don't drop by a significant amount until they hit menopause. So biologically, this is also later for women. So, thrown a lot of science and facts at you there, but what is a practical takeaway from all of this, right? Yes, our bodies change over time. That is completely normal and there's nothing wrong with it. But the truth is we can all have great sex at any age. It doesn't depend on our bodies and what's physiologically happening in them so much. Mostly it comes down to how well we understand our bodies, and we need to understand what's happening in it at any given time. It comes down to how confident we are, how well we're able to communicate with our partner or partners about what we want, what we like, what we don't like, how confident we feel saying no, but also how confident we feel saying yes. It's also just about knowing how to enjoy yourself. There's nothing shameful about sex, regardless of your gender or your age or your sexuality or any of your preferences, and it's really, really important to remember that. Next up, Bethany and Jennifer talk about refractory periods, and again, there's some bits in this that just aren't quite true.
As a woman, you're able to have another orgasm. Men cannot do that. They have a refractory period.
Mm-hmm.
So after they orgasm and ejaculate, there's a certain amount of time. In a young man, it may be 30 minutes. In an elderly man, it could be a week. But during that refractory period, they're not able to achieve another orgasm. But theoretically, a woman could just keep orgasming, and it could go on and on and on and on and on.
So she is kind of partly right here, okay? Different men have different refractory periods, and they do tend to increase with age. That is fair. But the idea of a refractory period for even a 70-year-old being as long as a week is incredibly unlikely. There have been a few recorded cases of that, but they're outliers. So in men, a refractory period happens because usually after someone has orgasmed and ejaculated, the body will release a hormone called prolactin, which it's thought plays a role in making a man unable to get another erection or ejaculate again. Some studies have actually found that some men don't release this hormone at all, and so they don't actually have a refractory period, so they can just go back to it, you know? It's incredibly rare, but there are cases of that. Some men have been known to experience what's called a dry orgasm, where once they've ejaculated once, they can still feel good again, but there's no actual ejaculate. So there's a lot of variety even amongst younger men. Now, amongst men who are kind of like, 18, 20, that sort of age, on average, the refractory period tends to be around like 15 to 30 minutes. And obviously it gets longer the older you get. So by the time you are around age 70 or so, as that's the example that Jennifer used, on average the refractory period tends to be around 20 hours for them. For some men, it can go up to a couple of days, but the idea that it's probably about a week, very, very rare, major outlier. It's just an over-exaggerated point. It's not exactly misinformation, it's just a lot of incomplete information, And again, what can we take away from this? Well, if your partner has a penis and, you want to go again, be patient with them. Give it a little bit of time. You don't need to rush. You don't need to shame them for anything. It's all good. It's natural. It's fine. You just need to wait a little bit. And in the meantime, there are other things you can do together which don't involve a penis at all. So just get creative, communicate, and have fun. Simple as that. Then Bethany just has to mention her favourite topic of conversation, and that's how she is older than Dave and something. Oh, this point is stupid, I'll be honest.
I know my husband and I, we joke because we've heard those statistics, and he's 5.5 years younger than me. So I'm 34, he's 28. We're like, we just timed this perfectly to have awesome sex because, he's in his prime, I'm in my prime sexually. This is great. But one of the things, go ahead.
Now Bethany starts asking real questions from real women who are apparently in her audience and her viewers and all of that sort of stuff. And she starts asking about what practical things can you do during sex to have a better orgasm. Now, some of these are pretty good answers. Fine, not too bad.
That's a woman who is taking responsibility for her own sexual pleasure.
I like that.
We need to do that. That is truly the first step, which is not thinking my husband needs to give me an orgasm. Let me tell you what will not help. And that's for you to lay there like a bump on a log. That's not going to help. So moving more. If you're familiar with doing the Kegels or Kegels, depending on what you like to call it, where you're clenching those PC muscles. So that would be if you're urinating and you stop the flow of urine, you've just used your PC muscles. So you can practice, don't stop your flow of urine, just do it once.
Yes,
identify those muscles, but that's the Kegel muscles that you're using. So breathing, moving, pointing your toes.
But the big thing I'm not hearing here is just communicate. Like, talk with your partner, tell each other what you like, what feels good, what doesn't. Why is that not on the list? It's very odd. But then other ones like the pointing your toes one, that just kind of made me laugh. Like, again, this was one of the clips that I showed my partner, and I was like, that's not just me, right? That's a bit weird. I don't know what pointing your toes is supposed to do for you. So me and Kieran had a date night the other night, and we were watching TV, and as we were, I kind of like stretched out a bit and like pointed at my toes, and he was like, oh, careful. It was quite funny. But yeah, I don't quite get the point she was trying to make or what that supposedly does. There is actually an interesting study which suggests that women who keep their socks on during sex are more likely to orgasm. But there is a reason for this. Apparently it's because a lot of women have issues with blood flow and being cold all the time, and we get very cold in our extremities like our hands and our feet. And that can be distracting for some women, making them less likely to orgasm. So by just popping socks on during sex, you can keep your feet warm, it's not a distraction, and you're more likely to finish. Fun fact for you, there you go. Now, this next segment is, again, one of their ongoing offensive to men bits.
Because I don't know about you, Bethany, but what I have, I mean, this is going to sound like I've not had tons of men, but in general, men, from what I hear, they're more like, grab anything.
Yeah.
I'll be happy with that. Anything you see, feel free,
Yes.
grab it. I'll like it. You know, they're not really picky about that. And usually what worked yesterday on him is going to work for the next 50 years.
It's true.
I'm sorry, but what? How is this woman a sex expert and saying this? I can't believe that two women who have seen a combined 2 penises between them are really sitting here talking about how every man is totally the same and they're always going to want the same thing all of the time. That's God's sake. Now, as a woman with experience of what Jennifer may call a ton of men, and judge me for,
I've not had tons of men.
I can honestly say every single man is different. And some of them are picky, a lot of them are, and they do deserve to be listened to and understood like the individuals they are. Men aren't always the same, and not all men are the same. Men do have fluctuating hormones. Men also have different emotions and change physically, and they do like different things over time. Each man is incredibly different and unique and wants to be touched in different ways, in different places, at different times. That is completely normal, and they deserve a partner who actually cares and thinks about this stuff and wants to actually get to know them and is willing to listen over time and change over time and be like, hey, what do you like today? This generalization that they keep bringing back up of like, lol, men are picky, is not only stupid, but honestly harmful and insulting towards men. What is the use of them telling women this? This isn't going to make anyone have better sex. This is just going to lead to men feeling alienated and isolated and misunderstood.
You know, that's something I did not understand at all in the beginning of marriage, was that whole idea. I thought, oh, having an orgasm, having pleasure, that's something my husband does to me. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Like, why is there this misconception that it's just something he does to you and, you know, you're just kind of this, like you're saying, like a lump on a log? Like, I feel so many women are in that place, and I feel really so blessed that I learned that. I can't even remember where, but I don't feel like that information is very available.
Oh, Bethany, I know exactly where you learnt this. Your religion, your lifestyle, purity culture, your family. And you know where other women are learning this? From you and your content. everything your church has taught, everything your books teach, everything your family teaches, and the things you preach to women teach women that they have to be passive. Every bit of content you put out teaches that women are passive objects in men's life. They all tell everyone that men are the sexual beings and women need to not tempt them while they're single and then not say no to them when they're married. Kristen and Bethany literally have a podcast in which they say that women need to be readily available to their husbands. They are making women sexual passive objects for men. And even just when things aren't about sex, Bethany's own beliefs take away bodily autonomy from women and make them passive objects in other people's lives. Bethany goes on many anti-choice, anti-abortion rants. How can she literally be campaigning for women to not be in control of their own bodies and then be shocked when women don't feel in control of their own bodies? How can you sit there going, you know what, women, you are just an object for this other being to use and you don't get any say over whether they can do that. You have to be passive in all this and just like, be a host to this thing, be a passive object, do this, you can't have a say, and then be surprised when women feel like passive objects who don't have a say in other areas of their life. When you tell women they don't have bodily autonomy, they internalize that in all areas of their life. Sometimes I feel like Bethany is so close to deconstructing, but she's still clinging to so much of the harmful stuff that she herself has spread in the past, and she can't and won't let go, and it is so frustrating to see. Jennifer, I don't know much about her background, but she does it too. Listen to hear how she literally describes the patriarchy.
And, Bethany, if we think about whoever has been in power in a culture controls the flow of information and controls how things are presented. Yeah. And certainly in American culture, and I would imagine in most cultures around the world, it's men that have been in power. And so a male-centered version of sexuality is what is presented. That it's quick, it's direct. Women are immediately sexually aroused. Yeah. And it's just, somehow it's just happening.
How can these two women sit here and say this stuff and Bethany can nod along and and agree with it all and still not call herself a feminist? What the hell? Jennifer then goes on to be like, why don't we ever see women trying to take control today?
And honestly, you don't really see necessarily like a woman saying, wait, stop, that's not feeling good today.
And that's the thing, Jennifer, you do. Maybe not in the circles that you move in, because you are still very much under patriarchal control and told to be these passive, objects for men. So that's why women feel they can't take control, because if they do, they'll be shunned and shamed by people like you and Bethany. But in other circles, this is what women do and have been trying to do for a really long time. This is what us feminists have been fighting for so long. For women to be able to take control of their bodies, their lives, their existence, and do this freely without risk of violence or shame. Women are doing this and they continue to do this, and yet you still have people like Bethany who have this anti-feminist rhetoric, who won't call herself a feminist, who blames feminists for all the bad things in the world. Oh, it's all feminist fault. Oh, they're wrong. They're blah, 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 blah. And yet she is actively benefiting from the work that feminists have done. She wouldn't have half the knowledge she has today without feminists. She wouldn't be able to make a course like this without feminists. She's here fighting back against the same thing that feminists are fighting against and saying, well, why is no one else doing this? But then mocking and complaining about the people who are. It's so frustrating. Then there's this phrase which I think is the worst thing you will hear in this entire course, and I'm sorry you have to hear this, but if I had to suffer through it, you do too.
Have sex school with your husband.
Yes.
And we're going to have sex school. I'm going to be the teacher. And he's going to probably be like, oh, yes, teacher, have a ruler. Oh, this sounds fun.
Just kill me now, please. Jennifer then has to explain to Bethany the difference between vaginal secretions and urine, but does it in the most disgusting way.
It's okay for you to oh, something feels wet down there. and smell it. And oh my gosh, that's not urine.
Yeah.
That's something else.
Again, this would have been a great opportunity for another bit of education, but instead, no. We just get, lol, sniff it, not pee. Fact is, when we're in a state of arousal, there are actually 3 different kinds of vaginal secretion that we may experience. Each comes from a different place and is made up of different stuff and serves a slightly different purpose. If you want to find out more about this, because again, I don't know how detailed I'm allowed to get on YouTube, but if you want to find out more, I'll pop some more information on screen right now that you can pause and read for yourself, or you can check out the book that this is from down in the resource list I've got in the video description. So this is from a book that's really, really great. It's called The Clitoral Truth by Rebecca Chalker, and it's a book that's actually well researched, will teach you a hell of a lot, and it costs less than a tenth of Bethany's course. So I recommend it.
And you have testosterone receptors. You have them in your genitals. You have them in your brain. You have them on your nipples. And you also have them under your arms. I don't know why we have them under our arms, but Bethany, don't let strangers tickle you. We're not even comfortable with pleasure. Like the receiving of pleasure, we may think, okay, I'm here to give pleasure. And again, if we look at pornography, then pornography is female performance for male pleasure.
Yeah.
And that is also male-centered sexuality.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, but again, this isn't an issue of sin. This is an issue of patriarchy and misogyny that your religion absolutely perpetuates. You can't even sit there and blame all porn because, as I said earlier, there's plenty of ethically made porn now which is made by women, for women, with a focus on female pleasure. So it's not like porn is inherently bad. It's kind of the motives of the people making it and the way that it's made. It's again so frustrating because they're so close to realizing the problems, they're just assigning the blame in all the wrong places. Thankfully, there's at least a good part to this where they talk about how if you experience pain or struggling after sexual abuse, then it's okay to take time and get help and get therapy. And I really like that they mentioned that. I think that that's a great part. Again, it's not exactly groundbreaking or worth paying for, but it's a good bit of information that I'm not going to complain about because it should be in there and it's a good thing to say. Bethany then asks, does penis size really matter? And again, it's so interesting that 2 women who have only seen 2 penises between them are answering this. But also the way that they laugh and giggle while answering this question, they're like, penis size. They're like children and it's ridiculous.
Okay, we have 2 more quick questions to wrap this up. I mean, obviously we could talk to you all day because we need just like a week-long Ask Dr. Jennifer all of our questions retreat. But another question she asks, does penis size really matter?
a great example of how the world takes what God created and distorts it and makes us worry about things that don't even matter. Well, if you the average fetus, again, this is just from statistics, not necessarily from my personal experience with lots and lots of penises, but the average penis is plenty long enough to get all the way in that vagina, but really only the first third of the vagina, which is only going to be in an aroused vagina, maybe if she has a really long vagina, 3 inches.
I don't know though. I think, this is a fair question. It's something that I think a lot of people, men and women, both ask and want answers to, so I'm not complaining about that. I do think it's important to talk about this stuff, but I think the way they answer is quite disrespectful to men, because of all the giggling and the childishness and the penis, you know what I mean. I think it's important to remember that all genitals are different and come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and there's no right or wrong, They're all lovely in their own ways, and they're a part of us, and we need to celebrate what we have and just accept it and love it for how it is, right? However, I also think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone's genitals will feel good to you, and your genitals won't feel good to everyone else, Some men might be too big or too small for you. Some might have curves or angles to their penises that just don't work for you and how you're made, and vice versa, Even vaginas vary in size and length and shape and everything, you know? And it's important to acknowledge this and know that it is never, ever okay to shame someone else for their body or genitals. But it is more than okay to say, you know what? I don't think we're sexually compatible. You have a wonderful body, but it just doesn't work for me. You know? And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to stay with someone who isn't right for you and doesn't make you feel good just because reasons and they happen to be the first one that you saw.
Men is that seeing their wife have sexual pleasure is very pleasurable for men. Whereas for women, you know, when we see our husband, he's getting excited, he's having a good time, we're kind of more like, yay for you. Yeah.
Again, this is a bit that I was like, what the hell? And again, I showed this to my partner and he was just like gobsmacked by it. Like, I don't think I said that before. Like, he was shocked by so much of this course. He was like, who are these people? How do you not enjoy seeing your partner experience pleasure? If you're saying this, I have to ask, like, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, like, are you sure you're even attracted to men? Very, very odd. Like I say, my partner, like, he couldn't imagine what it would be like to be with someone who didn't enjoy seeing him enjoy himself, you know? He was like, that's just wrong. And I have to agree. I feel like if you don't enjoy seeing your partner enjoying themselves, then there's something very selfish about you. It's just very odd to me. So I don't know, let's move on to our next lesson. And sorry, my tummy's grumbling, I'm quite hungry. Sorry if the mic's picking that up. I'm like, grumble, grumble. Gamble, gamble, gamble. Gamble, gamble. Okay, so, sorry. Session 4. Take control of your sexuality and grow your desire with Dr. Leah Gordon. So far I've not really seen anything all that different in the first few lessons. They've all focused on the same stuff. Bethany's asked a lot of them the same questions. They have different titles, but ultimately the content has been repetitive. The last lesson also had a big focus on women taking control of their sexuality, so I'm not sure how this is going to be any different, you know? And I think this is one of the big issues that I have with this course. It is very, very poorly organised. It's organised by speaker, not by actual theme or lesson. I'd have much preferred if Bethany had done some like major editing with this. There's nothing wrong with having all these different speakers and asking them similar questions, but it would have been so much better and more useful if, for example, Bethany had actually themed the lessons and like cut up these interviews, and she could have, for example, asked a lot of these experts the same or similar questions and then spliced all their answers together. You know, like if she'd been like, what's an orgasm? And then had the answer from speaker 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, how do you communicate with your partner? Answer from speaker 2, 4, 6, 8. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. It would have been a lot more cohesive. It would have been a lot more educational. It would have been a lot less boring. But instead she went for this lazy option and it's just terrible. So this episode features a naturopathic doctor. Her whole thing is basically, boo, birth control bad, pharmaceutical bad, boo, let me sell you my $100 supplements instead, boo, everything else, and so on. Like, mate, just buy a £5 bottle of multivits instead. You'll get the same thing. No, seriously, her website, like, she has, like, packs of supplements. It's, like, $300 a month. It is insane. Anyway.
All right. Welcome, Dr. Leah Gordon. I am so excited to have you here. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and really how you got into this whole, like, you know, naturopathic world?
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Leah. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and gosh, I have built 2 practices over my life. I'm also the founder of Womanhood Wellness, which is my online course program. I'm just really passionate about women's health and finding the root cause of imbalance and supporting women along their reproductive and fertility journeys.
Honestly though, for all my snarkiness at that side of things, a lot of the stuff she touches on really isn't too bad. She is probably one of the best speakers on here when it comes to talking about the sexuality stuff. This is the first person I've seen who actually bothers to explain what she's talking about in a few areas and actually be kind of educational, you know? She explains, for example, She is kind of anti-birth control, but she acknowledges that some people need it. So she explains what the pill is, how it works, explains how and why that has an impact on libido, and actually, like I say, bothers to tell people that, hey, if being on the pill is important to you because you're not ready to have kids or you don't want them or whatever, here's what you can do to manage your libido in other ways. I think that's great. It's actual information that these kinds of women who are watching this are going to need and get something out of. So I really can't complain about that. She is even one of the only 2 people in this entire course who actually bother to explain the difference between spontaneous and responsive libido, and it's genuinely good information. No complaints on my part there. I would have liked the course to be far more like this, please, like with this kind of information from the speakers. Instead, the focus is on more like, penis size. On my honeymoon, I had this traumatic experience. Don't do that, ladies. That's basically what a lot of the other speakers do. This is actual information. I prefer it. Next stuff though, she talks about things like using herbs to balance your hormones. It's a little close to woo for me, which is a bit of a shame. I wish Bethany had got an actual medical doctor in to talk about the stuff like libido and hormones and stuff like that instead of this woman, but you know, she's the best of a bad bunch, really. Leah here instead, like I say, she just uses this as an opportunity to sell her own expensive services and vitamin supplements and stuff, and it's frustrating. There's also some confusion and inconsistencies in some of the stuff she talks about. So in this little bit here, she talks about using matcha to increase estrogen.
Signs that your estrogen is lower, maybe your periods are really light, then you might benefit really a lot from taking an herb called maca. Maca is a really wonderful herb for boosting estrogen.
But I looked it up, and depending on which study you read, it can be used to increase estrogen or decrease estrogen. So which one is it? It's not an exact science by any means. It's a little, there's that. But I also can't help but laugh at how Bethany's eyes just like glaze over every time Leah goes on one of her like educational rants. Bethany seems quite bored by her, and it feels very awkward to watch. It feels like Bethany's been quite rude, and this is one of the more uncomfortable episodes to watch, if I'm being honest. Then Bethany asks this very important question.
So why do you think, this is such a huge area of our lives, like our sexuality, sex for most women, and probably most women who are watching this are probably, sexually active, married, things like that. And so I'm wondering, like, why is it that if this is such a huge part, and for many women, they are struggling, especially if they're here, they're like, okay, specifically in this session, like I am struggling and I don't want it to be this way. Why do you think that it's so difficult for us to find help or to find resources, or just like, I don't know, we just suffer for so many years rather than taking steps? Like, what is it with that?
Oh my god, she's so close to becoming a feminist, isn't she? She is so close to understanding it. Oh my god. I compiled a list of books that I think Bethany should read, which are very closely related to this topic of, why women suffer in silence, why they haven't been taken seriously, why women get overlooked and ignored. I think these books would benefit Bethany, and if you're watching this and asking the same questions, they would benefit you too. They're fantastic. So, The Authority Gap, Why Women Are Still Taken Less Seriously Than Men and What We Can Do About It, by Marianne Seachart. Invisible Women, which I've already mentioned. Data Bias No World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. Sex Matters, How Male-Centric Medicine Endangers Women's Health and What We Can Do About It by Alison J. McGregor. Unwell Women, Misdiagnosis and Myth in a Man-Made World by Eleanor Cleghorn. And finally, The Pain Gap, How Sexism and Racism in Healthcare Kill Women by Anushay Hossain. So many S's in there, I find them hard to say. These 5 books all take a really in-depth look at why women are not taken seriously, why our concerns are often ignored or overlooked, why women are often made to suffer in silence, why we're left out of studies and considerations, why we don't get treated the same when we're in positions of power as men do. They're absolutely fascinating reads, and I really think Bethany and a lot of her audience would get a lot out of them, and so many of her questions would be answered. So if you'd like to read these books for yourself, because I thoroughly recommend them, they're fantastic. Again, I'll leave some links in the resource document below. I've been quoting this one a lot, Invisible Women, in this video, but again, Perez gives a really great summary of the issue in her book. She writes, one of the most important things to say about the gender data gap is that it's not generally malicious or even deliberate. Quite the opposite. It's simply the product of a way of thinking that's been around for millennia and is therefore a kind of not thinking, a double not thinking even. Men go without saying and women don't get said at all, because when we say human on the whole, we mean men. Then Bethany and Leah got to talk about how like sex is complicated, blah blah blah, lots of mixed messages from blah, blah, blah.
Sex is really complicated. It's complicated in our culture. It's complicated in us as individuals. It's complicated because there's a lot that comes with sex, right? There's power that comes with sex. There's reproduction consequences. There's, certain people in our culture and our environment, when we're little girls, depending on the household that we grew up in, the religious institutions we're raised in, the cultural, programming at large around us, whatever country or culture we live in, gives us lots of mixed messages.
Yeah.
And I think, like in my life, I was raised Catholic. And so it was sort of like, we don't want to think about the fact that sex happens. Let's not look at it. Let's put our blinders on. You're bad if you have sex. There's just a lot of shame and guilt. And that was their somewhat effective way of keeping me from getting pregnant or keeping me from having these things, I guess, was their approach. And that didn't set me up to protect myself from the real world in many ways.
I'm very happy that they're calling out religion in this way. I think that's brilliant. It's not at all what I expected from Bethany's content, but I am glad to see it, and I have to give her credit for including this. Leah then goes on to talk about how no conventional doctor is going to study low libido.
No conventional doctor is going to study low libido. They're not studying all of these things. Maybe a sex therapist learns a little bit about it, but they don't learn about hormones. Everything's so segmented.
Mixed feelings on this, because traditionally, yes, that was absolutely true. This is one of the big points in those books I mentioned. Women's health issues and sexual issues have been ignored for so long, and that is a problem. But we also have to recognize that that is changing now, and conventional doctors are trying to study that stuff. They are looking into it. They are taking it seriously. It's still not perfect yet, but it's getting there. Sorry, Kyra's been really cute. She's got one of my jumpers on the floor and she's like mushed it up into a pillow and she's laying on it. It's very cute. She goes on to say, like, there's a lot of shame around sex, and listen to this.
So I think it's partly that our system is broken. It's very segmented. There's a lot of shame around sex. No one really wants to talk about it. And for the most part, I think, as like bad as it sounds in certain ways, I think women's concerns have just been not top priority for the majority of history,
For sure.
Just like the studies
and a
on
lot of
birth
women
control.
And yeah, this is exactly right in terms of like what it's been in the past. And this is what feminists are actively trying to change today and for the last few decades, There's a book that I mentioned before in this video by Rebecca Chalker, which actually discusses how women and their pleasure have been ignored a lot in sex education, but how some wonderful feminists have been fighting for decades to try and change that. So here's one example from her book, which I think highlights it pretty well. In the late 1970s, staff members at the Los Angeles Clinic for the Federation of Feminist Women's Health Centers did a pioneering study of women's sexual anatomy for their book, A New View of a Woman's Body. The book team of the clinic staff found that the current anatomy books gave short shrift to the clitoris, identifying 5 or 6 immediately accessible parts while describing the penis as a coherent organ system, usually with detailed illustrations. The Australian urologist Dr. Helen O'Connor and her colleagues did the first mapping of women's genitals using MRIs and credited the health centre team with their prescient work. They said, in the diagrams, the feminists of the 1970s expanded clitoral anatomy to include the bulbs and even the urethra as part of the clitoris, and she noted that they did so without the aid of x-rays and MRIs. So the point is, they're right that in the past, women and their health issues and their sexual health issues have been ignored and pushed aside, and yes, it still happens today. But Bethany and Leah, no matter how they try and portray it and spin it, are not the only pioneers on this front. Feminists have been fighting for this stuff for decades and continue to do so. And women like Bethany and Leah wouldn't have the knowledge that they have today or the opportunities that they have at all without these feminists that fought so hard for our rights and did so much amazing hard work. The same feminists that Bethany looks down her nose at and blames for all the problems in the world and demonizes in her books are the ones that are allowing her to be exactly where she is today and make these courses like this. And it's a real shame she can't see that.
Just to throw it in there, I think a lot of women watching feel like, oh, well, sex is more for the man. So it isn't really a priority. Like, this is just something like, well, I guess if it's not enjoyable, that's just my lot in life. And you're saying like, no, that's not the case. There is more there, you know?
No, absolutely not. Well, and again, we can go back to like ancient cultures and how, you know, we can go into the history of how women are actually much more sexual beings than men.
See, we're seeing that she's learning. She's so close to the truth. This is actually huge progress, but she's just not there yet. Leah then goes on to talk about some practical communication tips. And again, I think this is pretty decent. I really do. I wish there was more stuff like this in the videos. What's quite funny though is that Leah talks about us all having masculine and feminine energies and how some people lean more one way than the other and how it can be a spectrum and blah, 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 blah. And Bethany's like, yeah, absolutely.
The whole idea is that everything in life has masculine and feminine energy, and there's polarity and dynamics between those energies. It does not mean male and female. Human beings have masculine and feminine within us. Every person has some level. So if you imagine it as a spectrum, and we can slide up and down that spectrum throughout our day, women and men can both be masculine and feminine in their life. In the bedroom, it's kind of important to ask yourself, who am I in the bedroom? What do I like? And what does my partner like?
Yeah. Well, and you can, you know, that's the great thing is you can pull the things you like and go, okay, I don't like that. You know, just take what you like, ditch what you don't. But I love that whole masculine energy, feminine energy, because it just makes that like totally resonated with me when I first heard you talk about that. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, you know, like, and I hadn't even like, I hadn't put that into words. Like I didn't know how to describe that. But when you described it, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And like, even in my husband and I, in our relationship, we'll naturally kind of go one way or the other, you know, like depending on just the day or the night or whatever. But it's like, oh, that makes sense. And you don't have to, you know, every time it's not, you don't have to stay in the one type of, you know, energy. You can swap, and communicating about that can create such a really fun, passionate, beautiful experience.
And while Bethany has been so disgustingly transphobic in the past, and so there's only two genders, and women need to be women and feminine, and men need to be men and masculine, and blah, 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 it's so funny to see her nodding along and smiling with someone who is quite literally saying the opposite. And she even goes on to talk about like her and Dave's always fluctuating masculine and feminine energies and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm like, is Bethany being more progressive here? Is she seeing the error of her transphobic ways? Is she trying to make amends for that? Or does she just not fully understand what Leah's saying and agreeing anyway because she has no unique ideas of her own? I don't know. Leah even goes on to recommend some actual good non-biblical books like Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, which I think is great. Great book, great recommendation. We love to see it. I'm back with a cozy jumper, and we are going to cover session 5, The Truth Path Towards a Spicy Bedroom, with Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill.
Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, thank you so much for joining us. In this course, we have women from all over the world who are here because they want to know, like, okay, how do I have a great marriage? How do I have a great sexual relationship with my husband? They may be in a place where they're doing really well, and some of them are feeling really, really discouraged. And so I'm just really grateful that y'all are here to share your wisdom, to share some of your story, and ultimately just to help us understand better how to have an awesome sex life in our marriages and to just get excited about it.
This one I was concerned about going into because these are the two people that I have seen clips of before. These are two people who I spoke about in my Saga of Bethany Beal video because the man just seems horrible. Obviously, I don't know what's going on in their relationship, but the way he's spoken about stuff and the experiences they have, he seems like he could potentially be abusive. The woman, Phyllis, bless her, she has suffered so much in their relationship for literally decades. But it's not like she's an innocent victim in this because they've both done absolutely horrible things. They thought for years Phyllis didn't have a clitoris and that she was broken. But instead of opening up a textbook and trying to find out where it was, they got someone to use their infant daughter as an anatomy doll and point out the clitoris on her and find it and essentially sexually abuse their child so that they could have better sex. I do not like these two at all. If you'd like to see some clips about it, then here's a segment from my Saga of Bethany Beal video, but I would recommend going and watching that in full if you're interested, because it's a good video, actually. I worked hard on it.
We thought our first sexual encounter would be spiritual, would be like beyond any joy experience in our lives. And it was really just the opposite for me. And
for me, it was the greatest 11 seconds of my life. So, and I was shocked at how ungrateful my new wife was. I'd learned quite a bit about sex from my fellow third graders.
Neither of us were prepared for the disappointment, for the trauma. Like there was, for me, the whole experience, and I didn't have a voice. I didn't know how to communicate what was happening for me. It went from 0 to 100 way too quickly for me. It didn't feel right, but I didn't know how to say that. And I didn't know how to communicate my pain in it. Glenn was just so confused. It didn't take long for us to actually just decide that I was broken.
You know, this poor woman happens to be broken, and this poor guy happens to be married to a broken woman.
I understood enough to know that this was my duty. This was my wifely duty. So it didn't matter if I liked it or didn't like it, or that I felt pain. For me, it's like this is what marriage is now. Like I would say all the fun we had dating all of a sudden didn't exist anymore. I was trying to survive. And, you know, I did the mandatory number of times sex in a month, whatever that was, but there was not pleasure in it for me. And I didn't actually think there was pleasure in it for any women. This is just a wifely duty thing. Can you define broken? What are you saying? What does that mean? And then I just said, oh, well, I don't have a clitoris. Because at this point, Glenn had read enough to know that a clitoris was involved and didn't know where it was, but knew that mattered and that had to do with an orgasm.
And our friend, after a bit, said, you know, I just feel like taking Phyllis in the back room and showing her what I'm talking about. Well, Phyllis started to stand up. And then this other woman said, but I just can't. I can't do that. Our oldest child had been born, which is a little girl. And eventually Phyllis was changing our daughter's diaper, and our friend showed her on our little girl, you know, where the clitoris is located, which was huge information for Phyllis.
So my expectations were low going into this lesson, and somehow it managed to be even worse. So in the beginning, Bethany talks about how she thought these two were great because they spoke about stuff like taking pole dancing classes with the women from church. Ooh, spicy.
And, you know, my first exposure to Dr. Glenn and Phyllis was actually a podcast episode by Francie Winslow, who also taught a session for us. And Phyllis, you were talking all about how you went with a group of ladies and you were learning how to pole dance and striptease and lap dance. And I was like, I've never heard anyone talk about this, but I love it. I loved it all.
It is interesting how Bethany feels it's totally okay to do this stuff there once you're married, but without marriage, it's such a dirty and you're disgusting, dirty sinners. And there are some very odd hoops that she's jumping through in her head. Anyway, she begins by asking these two to talk about their background and problems with sexual dysfunction.
Purity, we came from a very religious background. Purity was the one thing that was talked about. And so we went into our wedding kind of thinking, okay, we've done all the things that we were supposed to do. And we've set ourselves up beautifully. We have God. And so then we go into our honeymoon, and the very first time we have intercourse, I was in shock. Like, as in, that was not good. That was not fun. That's what we saved. I was super disappointed.
Yeah, and that lasted for many, many years. even as we started getting some information that was helpful,
Mm.
we were really a good 20 years in, a little
Wow.
more than that, before we started getting traction.
And honestly, that's what most of this video is. It's these two complaining that they had a terrible, terrible marriage.
The reason was we had no idea that emotional connection is the bedrock, is the foundation, is what you build a great sexual connection on. You can have sexual activity, and that's what the vast majority of couples have. That's what we slowly began developing, having was sexual activity. But we didn't know that, we don't have sexual connection. We're just doing a sexual act.
I didn't even understand emotion. So I didn't realize we were not emotionally connecting. Did not even know what that was.
Honestly, this is a scary thing to hear, right? How did they not realize that you need to have like a good emotional connection with someone that you're having sex with, you know? Like, honestly, it is the foundation of everything. How do you not know this? Even if you're having casual sex or a one-night stand or anything like that, like, you still need an emotional connection there. You still need to trust them. You still need to be able to communicate with them. You can't just be like two robots, just like cold and empty and just It's very, very odd they didn't realise this. Gets worse too. If there's one thing I've taken away from this course, it's that I've become even more concerned and saddened for so many of these people. Like, I've spoken a lot on my channel about religious trauma and how, like, you know, harmful views of sexuality damage people and stuff like that. But now we're actually seeing the consequences of that in front of us. Real examples from real people.
That is not the way we were raised. Oh, no, not at all. I mean, sex was never even talked about.
Yeah.
So everything seemed wrong. We put ourselves in a really small box because we had so much fear of doing something that would send us to hell.
Yeah, and that's what purity culture does. Like I say, we're seeing these people discuss these issues in real time, almost like they're deconverting in front of us. But also, so many of them just happen to miss the point, and it's very, very frustrating to see.
The problem with what we've done culturally is we mostly just talk about logistics. And just go to a grocery store, pick up Cosmo or Redbook, and it'll have an article, maybe 3 or 4 articles in there about, you know, how to have the greatest sex tonight. And it's all about logistics. It's just about a new technique, a new idea, you know, light candles.
There is something that I'm seeing repeated, though, throughout all of these experts so far. It's that all of them seem to think that the secular way is emotionless, meaningless, there's no focus on connection, and that's just not true at all. Like I say, like, plenty of us atheists and non-believers and everything like that, a lot of us have very, very meaningful relationships or long-term relationships and stuff like that. Plenty of atheists and non-believers get married. Plenty of people like me who don't necessarily want marriage, but you know, we end up in long-term, very meaningful, very fulfilling relationships. There's a lot of love and connection and, you know, it's very special. And even amongst those of us who have more casual sex and relationships and stuff like that, that doesn't mean it's cold and meaningless and emotional. It just means it's a different kind of emotion we're experiencing, a different kind of connection, a different kind of meaning. This is very much a straw man on their part, but I think it's because they genuinely don't understand, and yeah, it kind of makes me feel sorry for them, you know? It's very interesting to see, because in some ways it feels like they're finally coming around to seeing the same things the same way that we do, but they don't want to admit that it's the same, so they're projecting this like harmful image and idea onto the rest of us, you know? It's like they still want to be like, I'm still better than you, so you just don't understand emotions like I do. Which is, again, frustrating.
And I think that, you know, for us, there was a lot of pain because for me, everything was not okay. You know, like I believed that we needed to be in the dark, in the bedroom, under the covers. And I just, somehow that made sense to me. And so then I made that my rule, my law. And it just, there was no freedom. There was no safety. There was just a lot of pain.
Again, this is heartbreaking to hear. It's horrible, awful. Apparently they believe that historically we made it about the male and so on.
And what we've done for many centuries is we've said the party's about the male. It's just a time for him to get his rocks off. And she's just supposed to show up, be available, just, you know, be a sperm receptacle, basically. And so we've made the party about the male. Well, the problem with that is the male is so much more readily and so much more easily sexually activated the vast, vast majority of the time.
And again, it's great that they're critiquing this idea, but oh my God, this is literally what Kristen and Bethany have said about marriage themselves, word for word. Like I say, you got to be readily available to your husband. This is things they've spoken about again and again and again. So Glenn and Phyllis are literally calling out the kinds of content that Kristen and Bethany have put out before, and Bethany's just nodding along and smiling like, yeah, I totally agree, but doesn't acknowledge that she was part of the problem. I'm not sure if she even really understands herself that she was part of the problem, you know?
So now this woman never even shows up. I mean, she never really gets in gear for the typical woman. And there are certainly variations. It's a spectrum. But the typical woman is not even going to get aroused for about 10 minutes. Well, your typical guy is already orgasmed and he's drooling on himself in the corner. I call it the post-orgasmic coma. And she hasn't even shown up yet. For her to have that voice, and again, it gets back to the emotional safety, for her to be able to say, I feel sexual joy about this idea. And again, we didn't have that for decades in our marriage.
Oh, for God's sake, decades. Decades! Oh, I know this one is awful for what her and her husband did to their baby, but after hearing this, I just pity her so much. And it's no wonder she looks so miserable, is it? Oh. And then, of course, this couple have to promote their course, and Bethany wants to try and sell it because, you know, $169 isn't enough, is it? You need to get more money out of people. Literally, she's getting people to pay $169 just to have more stuff advertised to them. Ah, Bethany. Bethany says that she gets people saying to her stuff like, how can you as a Christian woman promote this?
Friend of mine who is like a YouTuber and stuff, we decided to do an Instagram live talking all about this whole idea of how to become sexually adventurous and spice up your marriage. And after that, it was crazy. We had a lot of people who were very excited, but then I got multiple DMs and messages from people who, you know, on their way out from following you, they like to announce how they think you're terrible and, you know, they're unfollowing you and, you know, whatever. And so they were telling me, how dare you as like a Christian woman, how can you be promoting this? How can you even be talking about like this? This is terrible, you know? And it made me so sad that we as Christians have somehow come up with this idea of what's okay and what's not okay sexually. I don't know. So why is that? I mean, y'all are the experts. Why as Christians do we have these like harsh lines and we say, oh my goodness, striptease and with your husband, pole dance, like this is awful. Like you're not even a Christian. Like what's going on that we've come to this place of thinking that?
Can you hear yourself right now, Bethany? Can you? Oh my God, I am actually kind of shocked at the levels of cognitive dissonance on display here. This guy, Glenn, then goes on to describe how historically people were more sexually accepting, but over time, certain figures started putting more and more restrictions on people sexually, but he just doesn't understand why. Like, literally, he says he doesn't understand.
This shifted drastically. The oldest extant writings that I know of are from Clement of Alexandria that began putting restrictions on sexuality, that, you know, you're not allowed. The very first thing he said was you shouldn't be involved sexually on the high holy days. Well, then that began expanding more and more. And for whatever reason, it sounded really cool to his audience, to the people of the day.
And so because of all this, all of them fail to understand that these kinds of restrictions and oppression and, you know, honestly, shaming of women and sexuality in general, he fails to understand that a lot of that was done in the name of religion to try and oppress and control people, especially women. Of course he doesn't understand if he's just refusing to look at a big chunk of the historical context. In Chalker's book, The Clitoral Truth, subtitled About Pleasure, Orgasm, Female Ejaculation, the G-Spot and Masturbation, she tells us, women's genitals have not always been seen as shameful. The vulva was always carefully detailed on the prehistoric Venus figurines that date back to 35,000 BCE, and gold and silver models of the vulva were often deposited by worshippers of the goddess Ishtar in her temples in ancient Babylon. So it's very clear that like female sexuality used to be celebrated. It used to be normal. It used to be this like absolutely accepted part of society. And this is absolutely what Glenn is getting at. But he refuses to acknowledge what changed. And he also completely misses out on offering kind of like practical solutions for how we as a society can reclaim this power back. Thankfully, Chalker addresses this in her book, even though Glenn and Phyllis never do. Chalker writes that the task of transforming the male-centered model of sexuality and developing a more equitable idea is a challenging endeavor. It requires, in part, reclaiming information about women's bodies and sexual response that has been lost or ignored under the antique phallocentric model. It also demands a broader understanding of what sexuality is and isn't, that it isn't just mood, body parts revealing underwear and orgasms. It's a part of who we are as sentient human beings, and it varies from person to person, culture to culture. Constructing a new model requires a thorough evaluation of the psychological, social, and biological facets of sexuality. Perhaps the biggest step in constructing a new vision of sexuality is for women to develop a stronger sense of themselves as independent sexual beings and assume a sense of sexual agency that has for so long been solely the birthright of men. And again, this is what so many of us feminists have been fighting for so long. And it's, funnily enough, what Bethany seems to be on board with too. She supports this idea. She just doesn't seem to accept how it became a problem yet. And she doesn't see that in a lot of ways, this makes her a feminist. I don't know why she's so reluctant to assume the label when it clearly fits, or it's starting to fit at least, you know? It's very interesting that Bethany's starting to understand that these restrictions on female bodies have damaged her as a Christian woman, but she can't see that the similar restrictions she places on those of us who are secular or in the LGBTQ plus community also face the same hurt and damage, but to a more extreme level, you know? She can see that, okay, these rules of oppression have damaged me, but I'm going to keep putting these rules of oppression on other people, regardless of the damage it's causing to them. Does that make sense? Like, she sees that these people have hurt her with their needless restrictions and control of her body, but she fails to realise that she is actively doing the same to other people. It's a step in the right direction on Bethany's part, but it's not enough.
Even in their books, there's at least one chapter that was headed something like, what's okay, what's not.
Yeah.
And so there's this fear, this overarching, overhanging fear that, have fun in marriage, but just be careful. We don't want this couple to step outside the box. Nobody knows what the box is and where it came from, but we're sure that there's a box. And our whole positioning is there's no box, just have fun. We always say there's two people that get to vote on Phyllis and Glenn's sexual activity, and it ain't you. It's Phyllis and Glenn. That's it. Now, that also means Phyllis and Glenn don't get to vote on your sexual activity. And, if somehow we were to hear about some of it, we might raise our eyebrows and go, well, that's different. That's weird. We don't participate in that kind of sexual activity. Well, we don't get a vote. So you're allowed to do whatever you want to do, whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah. Oh my God, see? They're right. And they're so close to getting it. They're right that people shouldn't insert themselves in other people's sex lives and that it's just between them. So why did they still try and insert themselves into the sex lives of people like me and others like me? They're so close to getting the point, but they just don't. They still insert themselves in the sex lives of secular people and the LGBTQ plus community, and they hurt us and damage us, and it causes all these problems. And yet they're like, but no one deserves to be in your relationship but you. No one deserves a say but you. Unless it's this relationship that I don't like, and then I will have a say and shame you. Does that make sense? Bethany! Oh, for God's sake. Oh my God, and then listen to this from Phyllis.
It is.
So how do we...
Dad,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just, the question even being asked, it's like so many things in our life we don't figure out, where did that come from? I mean, even the women's right to vote, I think for most of us, how did we ever live in a society where women didn't have the right to vote? And but it was a big fight, right? To get the freedom of that and to give women the right to vote. And now, in our generation, we can't imagine life any other way. But there was a time when women didn't have that right. And I remember one of the things that was said about it is, well, women are too emotional. So we can't trust that. And that's why we don't want them voting.
Feminists got you that vote. Feminists. the same feminists that Bethany has spent her entire career up to this point denigrating and attacking and mocking and blaming for all the problems in the world. They got you this vote. Learn a little about feminist history. I'm shocked.
God created men and women to be equally valuable, but purposely different. And the reason that we're not feminists and what we're about to share with you is because feminism at its core, and we know there are so many definitions out there, but at its core, feminism has tried to define womanhood on its own terms. It's not just about women's equality with men. It's about redefining womanhood altogether according to man's and women's terms rather than how God defines our womanhood. So basically, if you want to accept and embrace all of the ideologies and thoughts that go along with modern feminism, you really have to reject so much of God's word. Yeah, there are good ideas here and there, but if you're going to embrace it as a whole, you really do have to become your own God and say, no, I'm going to define my womanhood. Sorry, God, I know better than you. This is what I need to happen.
Here's a good suggestion from them.
The first thing I would say, and on the podcast, we talked about the core emotion wheel to be able to process through the emotions that are happening for you. This fear is real. The shame, the pain, whatever is happening, whether physical pain or emotional pain, to process through all that. That's step one all the time in every situation.
Got it.
Right. I don't actually hate this suggestion. As an autistic woman myself, I sometimes struggle to identify and express my emotions. So I use an emotion wheel to help me name my feelings so I can address them. It's great if it helps, and I have no issues with them suggesting this. Like I literally... go to my image folder now. Oh, low battery. Go to my image folder now, and I have saved on here a little feelings wheel. And whenever I'm struggling to express my emotions, I get this up. And you start in the middle, and you have things like fear, anger, surprise, happy, disgust, sad. And then once you can kind of identify, like, okay, here's the overarching feeling that I'm feeling, then you can go through and get more specific about what you're feeling. So, like, am I feeling disgust, for example? Okay, but what kind of disgust is it? And then you can come in and be like, am I revolted? Is it revulsion? Is it loathing? Is it judgment? That sort of thing. Am I feeling anger? Okay, so am I devastated, embarrassed, insecure? And that sort of thing. And then you can go through and really identify and name it. And it really, really helps, because sometimes I have these big, huge emotions and I'm like, but I don't know what it is. And if you don't know what it is, you can't fix it. So I use the emotions wheel, and it really helps me communicate my feelings a bit more and helps me put these big emotions into words. And it's been absolutely invaluable, especially when it comes to communicating with my partner and stuff. Sometimes I'll just be like, I'm having a big feeling and I don't know what it is. So then I get out my wheel, I identify it, and then we talk through it, and it's wonderful. Their idea of this emotion wheel, it's a bit more simple than the one that I use, maybe because they don't need it to be as complicated, but yeah, anyway. Good stuff, good stuff. Phyllis then complains that most women don't understand their own pleasure or how to orgasm, so you should do that and practice. But again, she never says how. How do you understand your own pleasure? How do you practice? Oh, for God's sake. Like I say, there's so much in this course about the what you should be learning, but nothing about how to learn it. No actual information. Glenn then makes a surprisingly good point about how it's probably tough for mothers to go from mum mode to back to feeling like an adult, a lover, and connect with her partner, like that transition between the two modes and how you have to be very different and stuff like that. He talks about how that's probably difficult. It's something that I don't relate to myself, obviously, child-free woman, but I do think it's a really important thing to talk about and help women kind of work through and come to terms with and accept about themselves and, work on that transition. So I think that's quite a good point, and I'm surprised that Glenn made it.
For us, some of us, it's from, childhood where we heard how bad and wrong and dirty it all is. And so it's like, wow, then no one going into my wedding, no one ever showed up to say, actually, you know what? This is the best thing ever. No one did that. So I only got the negative messages that it was just all like some necessary evil that we had to participate in. And we even, heard people in our circle that talked about it's only for procreation. That's the only reason you have intercourse.
Wow. That's God, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? For God's sake. Okay, we're now 30 minutes into a 45-minute lesson on spicy bedrooms, and so far the only spicy thing we've heard is that I once went to a pole dancing class with some women from church. That's it. That's the spiciest thing they say. They don't even say what the pole dancing class was like, why they went, what it taught them, none of that. It's just, yeah, we did it. And that's it. They do mention some things like, we have weekly sex dates, but then the rest is just a rehash of like, oh, we all have religious trauma. Here's our religious trauma. And the practical advice they give is, talk to your partner, make them feel safe. Like, okay, yeah, cool, good advice, but that's not exactly helping with a spicy bedroom, is it? Like, I thought that's what this lesson was meant to be about, and there's been nothing so far. Do any of these people actually know what a spicy bedroom is? And I feel really awkward saying the word spicy so much. It's a horrible word in this context, and I am not a fan of it. I would honestly assume that a lesson on this topic would include information on things like what kinks are, how can you safely explore them with a partner, talking about how to communicate your needs, talking about safe words and consent, talking about like what possible kinks you might want to explore, how you identify what you like and what you don't like, how you set boundaries and stuff like that. I'd expect to hear about maybe things like exploring with toys or trying out new things, you know, that sort of thing. But there's been absolutely nothing on any of that in the first 2/3 of this lesson. So, with 1/3 left, I want you to place your bets now. Will they actually talk about spicy, kinky, sexy stuff in the last third or not? What do you think? Well, let's see, shall we? They start off by more upselling. Great. They sell this other course of theirs. Like I say, Bethany is literally just getting people to pay to watch ads, isn't she? And now, look at this. Practical tips like taking a pole dancing class. Great question. Wonderful, brilliant, except they don't actually answer it. Phyllis says that if you want to get spicy, we need to be creative and blah, 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 and get creative and try things out. But then she doesn't really give any practical examples of how to do that or how to be creative, what creative looks like. She does kind of mention some things that people might like, but they are the tamest things imaginable. For example, you might like to wear white lace, burn candles, run a bath, have a shower together, or play music during sex. Her more extreme examples are keep a sex journal and play sexy Scrabble together. If this is what these experts think peak levels of spicy are, then I can't. And yeah, that is it for this lesson. That's the entire last third of this lesson. God's sake. Oh, really, really not that helpful. Again, not sure what I can say on YouTube, but if you would like to explore this area in more detail, there are a couple of books I recommend. One of them is called Becoming Cliterate, Why Orgasm Equality Matters and How to Get It by Laurie Mintz, Mating in Captivity by Esther Pear. And if you're interested in exploring areas like polyamory or having other people in the relationship and things like that, or even just kind of like how to safely have sort of more casual relationships and stuff like that, you might want to check out The Ethical Slut by Dottie Eston and Janet W. Hardy. And finally, one which is a little bit more of an adult recommendation. It's quite graphic. It does have images in there. This really is only for the adults, but it's called The Little Book of Kink by Jessica O'Reilly. While researching this video, this is one of the best books I found that thoroughly covers the spicy, kinky side of sex, you know. It really thoroughly explains important topics in that area, like consent, how to specifically and accurately communicate with your partner or partners, how and why to build trust and take things slow, and so on. It gives you specific descriptions of things you might want to try and how to do it safely and carefully. It also touches on big important areas like aftercare with your partner and stuff like that. So if that's what you're interested in, it's very, very useful. Like I say, that's definitely one that's just for the adults. I don't really have a lot of teenagers watching me. It's mostly like women in their 20s and 30s. But just in case you're a bit younger, I would say wait until you're older to take a look at that book if it is something that's interesting. But the others are pretty much fine and accessible and, you know, very appropriate for lots of ages, you know, that makes sense? Anyway, next session 6, Overcoming Sexual Hurt, Addiction and Struggle with Dr. Joy Skarka.
All right. I am so excited to have Dr. Joy here with us. She is an amazing, godly woman, a mom. She is pregnant and has a little one. So I am so grateful for her being here just to offer her wisdom.
Okay, so an absolute massive change of tone now. I'm not sure how I feel about this lesson coming directly after the one on spicy bedrooms and kink. It feels a little like you got whiplash, you know? It feels probably not the best idea to do it in this order, but okay. Now, this lesson does cover some serious topics, and they do really need to be handled with sensitivity and a level of respect. And in some respects, I think they manage that. In others, it kind of misses the mark a little bit. It is interesting, though, that this is actually one of the shortest lessons on the course, if not the shortest one. So it feels odd to me that a topic which I think is very, very important is given the least amount of time. It's concerning, to be honest. But yeah, let's start with this, because it opens with Joy talking about her own experience and what led her to wanting to help other women.
Thanks, Bethany. I'm excited for this and can't wait for the whole course to come out. Looks like a great lineup of speakers. Because of the pain that I experienced in my life, I wanted to help other women find healing. I wanted to help create resources for them. And so, just long story short, in college, I was sexually assaulted on my third day of my freshman year. And through that, just trying to wrap my mind around what that was, what that experience was, a lack of a sex education. And I had all these questions, which led me to pornography, Googling my questions, trying to find answers. And so here I was, this 18-year-old girl. I also just became a Christian a few months after that. And so I'm a new Christian trying to figure out all this stuff. Flash forward to a year or so later, I just felt so called to start using my story to help other women because I felt so alone and I couldn't find resources to help me talk about all these different issues.
Yeah, I honestly think this is really commendable. I have nothing to complain about. I'll snark on here. Fine, yeah. Bethany, on the other hand, is like, oh my god, can you believe that? Let's pray together. And honestly, she's so needlessly dramatic that I felt very uncomfortable and ended up just skipping forward quite a bit over her stuff here because I felt uncomfortable with her response.
The women watching, especially if they, some of them may have clicked on this session first, like, hey, I want to watch this. This sounds like something I really need or I relate to. So let me pray right now before we really dig in, because just even your story may have brought up like feelings of like, do I really want to watch this? What's going to happen? Is she going to challenge me to do something? Like, so let me just pray.
Joy then talks about kind of like what it was like for her growing up, never talking about sex at home and that sort of thing. I mean, seriously, this whole series could just be about religion damaged us and made us scared of sex. Let's talk about attempting to get over that. Actually, if Bethany had marketed it like this, it would be a lot better, but here we are.
Was sex something that was talked about? Did you feel like you were equipped in this area? What was the atmosphere around sex in your home?
Right. So we never talked about it. Okay. And so after I had that trauma happen to me and it was a date rape. And so that was actually the first time I had intercourse, sex. Like I had other experiences and with, different things, but that was the first time that happened. And so it just brought so many questions because of not really knowing what had happened. And so that's when I started Googling. And so, looking back, growing up, I wish I did have a safe place to ask some of these questions, but I probably wouldn't have had the same questions until this experience had happened to me.
Bethany's whole response to all of this, though, just makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Like, is anyone else bothered about the fact that Joy is here opening up about her experience of being raped and Bethany is just smiling and playing with her baby throughout it? Like, it's disturbing and disrespectful and very uncomfortable to watch. Bethany then goes on to acknowledge how common sexual abuse is, especially amongst children, but again, doesn't seem to make that connection between fundies and religion and that being a problem. I spoke about in my video on the IBLP and their whole homeschooling and educational programs, stuff like that, how common sexual abuse and assault is in those communities, especially among children, and how a lot of the religious teachings and indoctrination make these children particularly vulnerable. It is a big, big problem. It's something that people with Bethany and Joy's backgrounds are victims of, yet they don't seem to acknowledge that that's what caused it, which is a worry. Joy then talks about how women can overcome trauma and abuse through things like journaling and sharing their story with people they trust. So that's actually good advice. I agree with that.
And I think it helps them first to be able to process through it on their own through journaling, writing out your story, what happened, trying to work on your healing journey first. And then when you're feeling a little courageous or braver, inviting others into this journey and really making sure they're safe people. It's because of the lack of sex education, which is why courses like this and other resources are so important, because people have questions and nowhere to ask them. They don't know safe places exist.
Bethany's nodding along here, and the thing is, they're right. Sex education is so important. But surely Bethany has to realize that she is part of a family and her content is part of the problem of, never providing sex education for kids. Bethany collabs with people who actively campaign against kids and teens getting a proper sex education in schools. Bethany and others like her promote abstinence-only sex ed, all of which is terrible and damaging for the kids. Again, there seem to be some levels of cognitive dissonance going on here, and it's not a good thing. If you'd like to see me talk more about the importance of proper sex education, which I should add, should absolutely be free and not something you have to pay $169 for, then I do have a video critiquing the sex education of Pam Stenzel, in which I go through and debunk a lot of her harmful misinformation, correct it and stuff like that. So I think that's worth a watch if it's something you find interesting. Bethany then pivots from let's talk about rape and abuse and trauma and assault and all these difficult things to let's talk about how to get free from porn addiction and understand God's beautiful design for our sexuality. Joy answers.
So I think so many women think that they're the only ones struggling with this, especially because when we hear sermons or messages on these topics, sadly, they're normally just addressing the men. And so that does create an extra layer of shame on women. And so I think the first step is realizing you're not alone. And this was a huge part of my story. So I was struggling in silence, had no idea. Honestly, I didn't even know other women did this, struggled with it. And so that made me think something was even more wrong with me. Even to the point I was like, maybe God messed up when he made me too sexual and all these different questions, which are all lies. And so I went to this college event with a ministry, and another woman went first and shared her story of how she had found freedom from these things and struggled. And that was the first time I'd ever even heard a Christian woman use these words. And so just after that, I went up to her and said, me too, like I'm struggling. I had no idea we could talk about this. And she just started discipling me, and we met at Panera and talked about the Bible.
I have mixed thoughts about this again, but overall, I don't think it's too bad until they start upselling again. Joy promotes her book, which you should totally go and buy on Amazon right now, even though it's ridiculously expensive. Audrey starts squeaking inappropriately again. It's just
one of the number one things I hear from women, and everyone knows I have my little Audrey with me, and she's very loud right now. So if you hear all the noises, it's Audrey.
Maybe don't have a kid there squealing through really important, heavy topics like this that, deserve a little respect. Bethany then compares the trauma of being sexually assaulted to what she went through, which was a relationship with the wrong person at some point. Great. Thanks, Bethany. Then there's more talking about women who watch porn being terrible people, blah, blah, blah. I thought, like I say, there would be more focus on this, on actual problems like healing from abuse, trauma, abusive relationships, assault, that sort of thing, but no. It was mentioned once in the beginning. Their solution was talk to people at church and journal, and then it was done, ignored, moved on from. It bothers me. It was not treated as carefully as it should be. It was not given as much time as it should have been. Not a fan.
Can you just give us a glimpse of the beauty that can be had in marriage?
has this destroyed your marriage? Is there, is it just like, well, now we just got to grin and bear it until we die, or is there, coming from what you've shared with us, what does your marriage look like? You said your husband, he read all of your blogs, he knew your story. Just share some of the beauty and the hope for women who are in the trenches and they're feeling like, I just need some hope. Can you give us a glimpse of some hope for them?
Yeah, so my story, I worked through most of this before getting married. So
Okay.
I really entered into marriage thinking I was fully healed, or at least, as healed as you can be from this. So it was surprising to me that it still impacted us in some ways.
And then Bethany just gets Joy to talk about like, oh my god, but I'm so happy now and I'm healed because I'm married and I've got 2 babies and and all that sort of thing. And then she talks about how healing is a journey, that you struggle with different amounts at different times. And honestly, that's just about the only useful thing in there. She's right, that's true, not so bad. Okay, on to the next session. Session 7, pregnancy, postpartum, and body image insecurity. This one is led by Bethany herself, and funnily enough, this and the next one, which is about infertility, are the two which I can actually admit Bethany and Morgan, who are running this, undoubtedly know more about than me. On the others, I think I've got an advantage, but this one, no, not at all. I have no personal experience with this at all. I have never been pregnant. Hopefully I will never be pregnant. I am a woman who is child-free by choice and is going to remain that way for a very long time, forever. So these lessons are absolutely not aimed at me, but I can respect that Bethany put them in here. I think they're important topics which should be spoken about, so good job, Bethany. Good job. I'm also shocked to say, I think this is the best lesson in here. I know. Listen to this.
And I'm so excited to talk to you today all about pregnancy, postpartum, body image, and all things that relate to that within marriage and sex and just the highs and lows and ups and downs. It is a whirlwind and such a surprising journey sometimes because it is just very unexpected and there's not a one size fits all answer or mold that we all go through. Each of our journeys with body image, each of our journeys with pregnancy, each of our journeys with postpartum can look very different. And that can be very challenging because sometimes we feel like we're the only one experiencing what we've gone through, or we just, we felt great before pregnancy and now our sex drive has totally disappeared, or we just cannot get aroused no matter how hard we try, or we're just exhausted and nothing sounds good. I am super excited to bring to you today some encouragement, some practical help, and really some hope. I have done some great research for this to bring you just some practical steps you can take so you can leave here today knowing, okay, there are a few things I can work on, or there are some places I can go to find more answers for myself.
She actually researched for this lesson. It seems to have an actual structure. She gives actual practical advice. I am shocked but impressed. I never thought I'd say this, but maybe Bethany should have taught more of this course just by herself and approached it all in this way. She talks very briefly about hormone changes and body changes. I wish there'd been a little more focus on the science here. Tell me, what are the hormones that are changing? Why do they change? How do they change? What are the direct implications that they have for you and your life and, that sort of thing? Tell me, you speak about the body changing, but what are these changes? As someone who's never been pregnant, I don't know what these experiences are actually like, but I do find it interesting to hear about. There's stuff about, how when the baby's growing and stuff. I don't know if you've seen, the diagrams and, the imaging and stuff of women who are pregnant, but, the organs are squished up and moved about all over the place. And that can take a long time to kind of, work back into a normal place and stuff like that. So it's no wonder that women have issues with, bladder control and eating and sickness and nausea and all that sort of thing, and I'm sure a lot else too. I wish she touched on that sort of stuff a bit more and there'd been a bit more of a scientific basis for that, but we can't expect that much, can we? Overall though, I'm not going to complain too much. It's fine. She spends the first 20 odd minutes of this video talking about her own story. It's all stuff we've heard before for free and all other content, so I won't talk about it too much. There's a bit too much information at times. She talks about how her and Dave couldn't have penis and vagina sex until 8 months after their first baby was born. And I get that you want to talk about things like tearing and pain and you know, waiting after birth to have sex and stuff like that. But like, maybe we don't need quite so many incredibly personal anecdotes, you know? He then talks about going to biblical counselling, making sure you communicate with your husband every day. Nothing really new, but honestly nothing that bad. This is more of the stuff that I cover in the Saga of Bethany Beal, so maybe go watch that if you're interested. And then she talks about things specifically like nutrition and exercise after you've given birth, and again, good stuff. I have no complaints there. It could all be presented better, absolutely. Some things she could go into a lot more detail with, but my expectations were so low, so I'm happy to say that I was actually impressed with this. Okay, cool. That was a quick one. Let's move on to the next one. Session 8 is sexual intimacy during infertility with Morgan Oates. I don't know how to say their surname. I never have, to be honest. Morgan, of Paul and Morgan.
The Paul and Morgan, the Paul and Morgan Show. Woo!
This one I was not looking forward to for 2 reasons. One, Morgan as an individual just annoys me.
So much.
I just feel like we are seeing more and more and more. I mean, it's so common now to literally see the pronouns of a person in their bio, their Instagram feed.
Oh, yeah.
He, him, she, her, whatever.
They, them.
You can't be a they, them people. You can't. I'm sorry. Pick one or the other at least. That's messed up.
And two, we all know that Paul and Morgan literally hate sex with each other. And possibly just hate each other.
There have been times when I've done something or said something to Morgan that's been so hurtful, and in the back of my mind I'm like, oh, it's nice knowing that she can't go anywhere.
Okay, that doesn't give you the right to say mean things
I
to your
feel
wife.
guilty about it. The first thing I knew about, I wish I had known about sex, was this. Okay. Don't expect your sex, once you get married, don't expect the sexiness and the adventuresome, crazy, awesome stuff to go from 0 to 100 right out of the gate. Realize that is going to take some time, and if I had realized that before getting married, I wouldn't have brought out the whipped cream on our honeymoon. It was a bad idea. It made Morgan cry. But in all reality, in my mind, it was, I'm finally married. Now I welcome everything in the kitchen sink into our sex life. Let's go wild. And Morgan's like,
I'm like, bro, I barely know you. There are times when either Paul and I are maybe even making a video or talking to one another or another couple, and like, we're like, oh, how's our sex life doing? I'm like, it's great. And Paul's like, well, it's good. And I'm like, wait, what? I thought we were good. I thought we were on the same page.
when you think you've communicated enough, communicate more.
Yes. So that really is just huge, 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 you guys. You don't wake up every morning. Oh, kissy, kissy, no. Okay.
I wish we did.
And you don't fall asleep all cuddly, no.
I wish we did. I'd like to go to bed snuggling.
We do. Okay, no, we're not putting this in the video.
We need to work on this. All right, I hear what you're saying.
Just move on to something else. You just act like I never give you any loving. It's fine. We need to move on. It's fine.
We did not literally find any hope or closure to that little scenario.
Somebody hold her.
I don't doubt Morgan knows about infertility. She struggled with it for a long time. She can absolutely talk about that. But she doesn't know anything about sexual intimacy at the best of times, never mind when you're struggling with other stuff. So why is she teaching this course? Why is she the speaker here? What? I'm also pretty sure this video opens with Bethany actively breastfeeding on camera, so that's something. Could you have not waited 8 minutes to finish before you hit record? Just a thought. There's also a ton of baby noises as Morgan talks, which is just distracting and a bit gross.
All right, Morgan, thank you so much for joining us for this specific session. We actually had a ton of people reach out when I mentioned that I was creating this course, and I didn't have anything on like intimacy and infertility listed in the sessions. And I said, hey, if there were anything else I were to add to this course, you know, the ultimate sex course for women, what would you want me to add?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. And I think that's really cool that women are wanting to learn more about that. And obviously it's not great. It's sad that so many women are struggling with that, but I get it. So for me, Paul and I got married in 2016.
Again, like, I wouldn't mind the baby noises and stuff in an average YouTube video because it's YouTube. It is casual, it's real, it's one of those things. People are recording in their homes like I am now. Like, you get background noises, it's to be expected. But this is a course that people are paying for. I expect a little better than for you to be sat there recording whilst you're actively breastfeeding and your baby is making distracting noises, you know? Just wait till she's finished feeding to hit record. People are paying for this. Let them be able to hear the content that they're paying for, yeah?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, as far as like how many kids we wanted or things like that, like, we're still kind of, that's open in the air, just however many the Lord wants to bless us with. I'm very happy with my one right now. So
you're cute little Luca is adorable. I know. Okay, so
by which she means they've been actively arguing about it a lot, as they've let slip on many a live stream. From what I can gather, Paul wants more. Morgan doesn't because the pregnancy was so hard on her. Drama there. I don't know, maybe they've sorted things out since last time I saw, but you know. Bethany brings up some really good points about how fertility issues affect a lot of women and how a lot of women blame themselves for it. And Morgan's response to this actually surprised me because this is one of the first times I've actually heard her be so positive about Paul and say something good about him being a decent person. Okay.
A lot of people know my older sister, Kristen. She struggled with infertility ongoing for 10 plus years. And then I ended up having 3 miscarriages in between my first and second. And just realizing like, oh my goodness, this whole getting pregnant and, you know, maintaining a pregnancy is literally a miracle from the Lord because this is so much harder than I ever imagined. I mean, my mom cranked out like eight babies, like nobody's business. And so I always thought like, this is, you know, and so to, you know, be like to see my friends and my sister and my own struggles in this area, it's like, wow, this is a lot more common and a lot of women are struggling. And it's hard because you don't know, none of us know if that's going to be our story.
Paul was like, other than the Lord, Paul was my rock.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I remember after probably 4 years, I was like laying in bed one morning. I had just taken a pregnancy test and it came back negative, and I like really thought that I was pregnant, and I climbed in bed and just started bawling my eyes out. And I remember just like looking over to Paul, and he knew that it had come back negative, and I was just like, I'm just so sorry. Like I can't give you a baby. Like I can't give you a child, and I just feel terrible about that. And he was like, are you kidding me? He's like, I didn't marry you like expecting you to give me a bunch of children. He's like, I've given this to the Lord a long time ago, and like, if we never have kids, I'm not looking at you in any type of anger or disappointment ever. And that was just like so encouraging for me to hear. And like I knew that, but just to hear it from him was really encouraging. And
yeah, I thought this was a great point from Morgan, and props to her and them for this. Yeah, cool, good, whatever. I am quite uncomfortable with this next bit though. Bethany says that while Morgan was struggling with her infertility, she is happy that Morgan didn't turn into a, and I quote, decrepit, bitter old woman.
I've so admired you and just how you have not turned into like, I know you have Luca now, but before that, it was so hard and you went through so many struggles and ups and downs, but it was so beautiful to see you and Paul like literally encouraging other couples online through your YouTube channel, and just the joy that you still had. You didn't turn into like a decrepit, bitter old woman, just like.
As though all women without kids or who can't have kids are decrepit, bitter old women. Do not like that, Bethany. Do not like that. Shame on you. Morgan then talks about her 5 years of struggles with bad sex. Apparently, it took Morgan, well, they've been married 5 years, and for 3 to 4 of those years, Morgan found sex horrific. It took her 4 years, apparently, to find the process even a little bit fun, which is interesting. Most couples you hear about, they're like, oh, it starts off fun, but when things get struggly, when there's stresses, when you're struggling with infertility, that sort of thing, that's when it starts to feel like a burden. But for Morgan, it was like, nope, the opposite. It started off a burden, and then she's like, oh, it took me like 4 years to convince myself it could be fun. Oh, this poor woman. God's sake. She says she finally had to learn sex is for more than pregnancy. Sex doesn't have to become an appointment.
It's okay to have some times where you're like, okay, there is a schedule. We do have to follow it. So this might just be a little bit more practical, medical. Like, is it okay to have that separation? Like, hey, we don't have all day. Like, you've got to get to work or we're exhausted. Like, we've just got to kind of like make this happen. Is that part of it?
I think so, yeah. And I think, honestly, you have to talk about it with your husband of like, yeah, there are just going to be some times where we just get it done to get it done.
Yeah.
I am so glad I'm never having kids. Bethany then asks about men having performance anxiety, and I would love to know what Paul would say if he was asked about this, because we all know what an insecure man-child he is. Morgan's response is incredibly awkward, and then she goes on to claim this.
But I have heard that it can be really difficult for the husband. I've heard it's called like performance anxiety, where when they're like, okay, you need to have sex at 6 p.m. and he needs to, basically produce or else that's not happening. And so when it's so medical, it's like, well, he's still got to make it happen or else it's not working. So for a wife, how can you encourage her in like the understanding of like, that is a very real thing, that it can be very hard for the husband to actually like, okay, like make it happen sometimes. And what can she do to kind of communicate with him and make this possible for him as well?
Yeah, we didn't experience that too much. Paul doesn't have much issue.
Now we all know about Paul's life.
And so it's just like, I don't know, it shouldn't ever be awkward to talk about sex with your spouse, but sometimes it just is.
I have always maintained that if you can't talk to your partner about sex, then you shouldn't be having sex. Regardless of what age you are, if you can't talk to them about it, you shouldn't be doing it, Maybe there's probably 1 or 2 exceptions out there, but I can't think of them right now. But as a general rule, it shouldn't be so awkward you can't talk about it, That's very, very unhealthy. Bethany then talks about things like IVF stuff and other fertility treatments and stuff, but can't bring herself to say words like masturbation, sperm, or ejaculation, which again is cringy as hell. They're just words. You can say them. If you're trying to educate people, you need to use the correct vocabulary.
So when it comes to certain aspects of infertility, you have to go into the, wherever you're going to, the doctor's office, and sometimes they're, wanting you to, especially for the man, to produce, right there. And they're like, okay, we need you to go into this room and make it happen because we need it to shoot up in her or whatever. It's so personal, infertility and trying to get pregnant. It's like you just have no privacy.
Yeah, we've had to do that twice. And the first time it was just like, wait, what? Like I've seen this happen in movies or on shows before, but like now we're actually in the room.
Yes.
So with us, you as the wife always have like the ability to go into the room with your husband.
Okay.
And that is what I did. I went in and I helped my guy out.
Yeah.
There was no porn gonna be involved in our stuff.
Oh, for God's sake, I paid to watch this, and I have never felt more disappointed in myself. Oh God, I'm gonna up my donation to mermaids for this. They deserve it. Morgan then talks about things like sex games, and it's incredibly awkward because she's clearly embarrassed by it. It's not the subject matter that she's talking about that's awkward, it's her attitude to it and how she's clearly embarrassed by it, which makes us embarrassed. Oh, I feel like I shouldn't be watching this stuff or hearing it. I just feel like if you're teaching a course on sexual intimacy, you can't be embarrassed to talk about sexual intimacy. You know what I mean? It's unprofessional, and it's just all a bit ridiculous, isn't it? Honestly though, watching especially this last part of the conversation between Morgan and Bethany, this might sound horrible as a takeaway, but honestly it made me appreciate my own friends a lot more, you know? My friends compared to these two are so much more mature and self-assured and confident in themselves and their sexuality, and I am so grateful to have them in my lives and not people like these two. I don't know if that sounds mean, but that was all I could think of while watching this. To my friends, I love you guys, never change, you're wonderful. Then there's more God stuff, and yeah, that's it. Again, not really a lot of substance to this. I feel like at this point, anything they bring up is just a rehash of what we've already covered, so I'm like, why cover it again? There's not much new in this. On a similar theme, session 9 is titled Questions Christian Women Are Too Afraid to Ask About Sex with Francie Winslow.
Francie, thank you so much for coming on here and joining us for this online course all about sex and intimacy. I know a lot of people watching right now probably know who you are because I am one of your biggest fans, but there may be some people who don't. And so I'm going to link everything for them below about your Heaven in Your Home podcast and your Inner Circle, all of your resources, because this I know is just going to whet their appetite and they're going to want to know how to connect with you more, how to get more of your resources. So don't worry, that is coming for you all. But we are going to jump right in to some of the questions that I have received from these women, and they just want to know some like honest, real answers to their questions. And I know you are the perfect one for this.
Again, this is even more proof that these course lesson things are just centered around the speakers and not actually any sort of real theme per lesson. This is literally just a series of cheap, poorly made, mediocre podcasts, and calling it an educational course that people have to pay for is a scam. You can get better, higher quality education from any number of YouTube channels with free videos, other podcasts that are free, and any of the books or articles I've linked in the resources document for this video. I recommend any of them over this course. Seriously, it's hard to tell what this lesson is even supposed to be about based on this title. It really doesn't have a theme, it's just about Bethany wanting to chat to Francie, that's it. So, this one's 34 minutes long. Let's go, let's do this. Can you tell I'm tired at this point? I'm so tired. Oh, pity me. Pity me, please.
So first question we had is how to make communication about sex with my husband more comfortable.
Okay, so I think one of the big lacks that we often have is just a lack of education about our bodies. And so I would say one of the biggest barriers that I found is that I didn't know how to begin this conversation. We would take dates. We had so little money, but we would take dates to the Barnes & Noble, even buy books. We would go and just camp out and read some of the sex books. And I was so embarrassed that I would put another book on the outside of my book so that people wouldn't know I was reading sex books. For a time where I felt like my mouth was wired shut when it came to this topic. Like I could not utter the words of my body parts or anything that had to do with desire. And I just felt like mute around that topic. And so it took using books and other people's language to be our language. I think another fun thing that you could do is use code words, because that kind of makes things playful, and like a code word for a position, or you learn a new kind of touch you like and you can give it a name and let books be the one to start the conversation for you. And like each other highlight things and then pass the book off if it's even too embarrassing to talk about it.
Okay, I have to be honest. I don't think this is the best advice. Now, the book thing, yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I don't mind that. Read books, educate yourself, talk with your partner about it. But the highlighting bits you're too embarrassed to say, using code words because you don't want to say the real words because they're dirty, like, it just sounds a bit immature. Again, if you're too embarrassed to say this stuff, you shouldn't be doing it. I would say the first bit of advice for this should be about learning to be comfortable with thinking and talking about this stuff yourself, you know? Learn the language around sex and realize that they're not dirty words, you know? Work with yourself until you're completely comfortable just saying words like vulva, vagina, penis, and so on. Because, you know, they should be as comfortable to you as saying other body parts like elbow, nose, knee. They all exist on us in the same way. They're all just body parts and parts of us, and nothing is more dirty or shameful or embarrassing than anything else, you know? They're not good or bad or anything else, they just are. They're a part of you, and you shouldn't be ashamed of acknowledging them. That is what I would say the first step to any of this is, just getting used to your body and not being ashamed of it. Once you've got that down and you're feeling good about that, then you can work on building trust with your partner in all areas. You should be able to tell them how you're feeling about everything from your emotions to your life to anything related to sex. Again, take some time to learn that sex isn't something to be embarrassed about. It's a very natural part of life, and it can be a great part of life if you want it to be. If you're gonna let someone be physically intimate with you, you need to make sure you can effectively communicate about it first. And if you're gonna be intimate with someone else, you need to know that they feel comfortable communicating with you too. That is the bedrock of all conversations around consent and understanding what consent is. You need to be able to communicate this stuff with each other. If you need to start small and work up, absolutely do that. That's fine. Maybe work on telling your partner things like, I like it when you hold my hand. I enjoy when you stroke my hair. Work on asking them for like physical touch and stuff like, hey, can you please place your hand on my back? Things like that. And once you're comfortable talking about that and communicating about that, then you can build up and ask and communicate about more sexual things. I'd say that this is a lot more healthy than having silly code words and being like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Will you read this page in the book, please? Like, that feels immature and is going to lead to miscommunications, it's going to lead to crossed wires, it's going to lead to you not actually feeling comfortable with this stuff. Work on your communication before you ever do anything physical. Book recommendation from them time. Oh.
Yeah, I would say any books by, oh gosh, it's dropping out of my head right now.
Is it the Penners?
The Penners, yeah.
No. Okay.
Joyce Penner and her husband, they have a whole line. One is a pleasure book for women and one is a men's book. And so I think those would be a fun place to start because the woman can read the woman's book, the man can read the man's book, and then you guys could even trade. But they have a whole line. They're sex therapists. They're like 80 years old. They're amazing. And they have so much practical wisdom that is also biblical.
Yeah.
Oh my God, these two. Okay, Joyce Penner and her husband. I have major problems with them. They are endorsed by Focus on the Family. They have done podcasts for Focus on the Family, so I do not trust them at all. I have spoken about Focus on the Family before in other videos, and to summarize, they are awful. They are homophobic, transphobic, anti-choice, misogynistic. They endorse people like the Pearls, who are notorious for literally publishing books about child abuse. Go check out my videos on those topics as well. When I first googled Joyce Penner and her husband Clifford, this Focus on the Family page was the first thing that I found. Even their credentials are questionable. Clifford calls himself a doctor and says he has a PhD, but it's from a very questionable Christian theological seminary. Not great. Looking at their website, they have a big focus on sex for Christian women, but also on sex education for kids and teens, and by which I mean not actually educating them at all. They offer resources on their website for free, including this article from 1983, which still mentions a recent study, which is clearly going to be outdated now, but even then they didn't mention what that study actually was. They say that the parents' chief concern for their teen should be to establish values around sex before the heat of passion gets their child in trouble. Parents can minimize risks of teenage sex by reducing the opportunities for it. Mothers and fathers should know who their child is dating, where he is going and when to expect him home. Idle time with a partner can lead to unplanned sexual activity. Parents should take opportunities to discuss the health hazards of premarital sex, such as venereal disease and herpes. Masturbation is also an important topic for teens and should not be ignored. I don't trust these two at all. I also decided to look up some of their books, which are just bizarre. A lot of them make very odd gender-based generalizations, like this chart from their book, Sex 101. This says there are some gender differences between men and women. For example, he wants sex, she wants romance. He wants to engage in activities. She wants to talk. He likes intense kissing. She likes pliable kisses. Sexually, he goes for more. Sexually, less makes her hungry for more. How are any of these outdated stereotypes helpful in any way? God's sake. They also write a lot about honeymoons, as though that's going to be everyone's first sexual experience. And again, there are a lot more awful gender-based stereotypes. For example, whether you spend your first night at a modest local motel or a 3-room penthouse suite, you should anticipate your special needs and desired circumstances. This will often be more important for the woman, since she will have borne the greater burden during the wedding planning and events. And women tend to be more affected than men by the circumstances of what is supposed to be a romantic time. Thus, the woman's needs should be given top priority. And on another topic, television. Television causes more trouble in marriage than is imaginable. Most often the husband watches and the wife feels neglected. The TV can become a mistress, and most wives do not like sharing their husbands. Another tip for honeymoon preparation is for wives to exercise their PC muscle by doing 5 contractions of the muscle every time the telephone rings. But along the way, don't forget the required blood tests for getting your marriage license. Seriously, God's sake. I skimmed through like 6 of their books, and oh my god, honestly, like, they are big into their cash grabs too, because there's so much repetition. They have like a crap ton of books, and in a bunch of them they legitimately copy some of the same chapters word for word between the books. Oh, lazy. God's sake. They're not as terrible as some of the books I've read and reviewed on this channel, but they're far from good, even for a Christian, so I would not recommend them. But in these last few lessons, Bethany is like recommending them left, right and centre. She goes off about these books. She loves them, and I just have to be like, no, do not. No. Bethany then admits that she doesn't know enough about the topic to explain everything.
Some of your episodes, your Heaven in Your Home podcast episodes, where I felt like, wow, this is so good. And I do not think I could even explain this. Like, for me, I'm not embarrassed of the topic, but I'm like, I don't know fully how to explain everything in a way that is so precise and well done and makes so much sense. And so that's something else they could do, is you can actually like listen to Francie's podcast, Heaven in Your Home.
Oh, good job you're not creating and selling a course on sex then, isn't it, Bethany? Oh. Wait. Then there's a bunch of blah blah blah, God made you so beautiful stuff, and it's just like, whatever. Okay, I'm not the target audience for this. Let's move on.
I had this question before I got married, and I was like Googling around, but from your perspective, okay, should you wax? Should you shave? How much should you take off? Tell us the grooming tips. Like, what are we supposed to be doing down there?
Okay. You are allowed to say the word pubic hair, Bethany. It is a thing. It exists. It's fine. It's not a dirty word. You don't know. Just be like, down there. You know, down there. Pubic hair. You can say it. It's fine. But seriously, like, they give a really long answer, but ultimately it's like, do what you want. Do what's comfortable for you. That's it. It doesn't have to be complicated.
How can I help my husband better learn what brings me pleasure?
Yeah, I think that's somewhat related to the first question you asked about how to make communication more comfortable.
Oh my god, we have literally covered this like 20 times already in this course. And it's all the same answers. Communicate, experiment, have fun. That's it. I don't need to hear it all again for like the 4th time. Oh my god, this response though.
Our beauty is connected to our soul. And so if we don't feel connected to our beauty, it affects our feminine heart. And our men are designed for strength. And so if they feel like they're not being strong for us, it affects their soul. So our sexuality is so connected to our identity as male and female, who are made to express and share beauty and express and share strength. And so I would say, affirm your husband. Like, I love making love with you. It's so fun being your wife. I would love to keep growing in my ability to be a good lover.
Oh, God's sake. Okay. There's a lot to skip here because, again, it's just repetition of stuff we've already heard. Why did anyone pay for this? The Facebook group, which I haven't joined, has like 250 members. So that means like 250 people paid for this course. Ugh. Then there's another ad for this woman's podcast. Actually, this one's podcast. Oh my god, this podcast that they promote is one I actually like listened to Bethany's episode of for my Saga of Bethany Beal video, and it's one that I cannot now open Spotify without it being recommended to me, and I am so sick of seeing it. Oh, I hate it. I really, really hate it.
For Christian married couples, how to know the line of what is okay and what's not. This is something I hear all the time.
Yeah, I've heard that all the time too. In this course, because you say it and ask it so much, you have asked this same question like 10 times already. So I've already covered this answer. You've already covered this answer. I'm bored now. You're just filling time. Like, yeah. Basically, the woman's answer is basically, well, all sex is in the Bible, so just go for it, you know? Session 10 is Should You See a Sex Therapist with Tish Hedger.
Hey Tish, thank you so much for joining us on the course. I know everyone has been so looking forward to this conversation. I just want to know, like, for my own curiosity, how in the world did you become a sex therapist? That seems so specific and very interesting. So can you just tell us about that?
Absolutely. So it really started with my own marriage. And I was doing my bachelor's. I hadn't even started my master's to become a professional counselor yet. And I remember just having a lot of questions. I didn't have really sexual discipleship or really good resources kind of in my own community at the time. So I remember literally going to Barnes and Noble and sitting down on the floor in the Christian section and reading every single chapter I could find on sexuality.
Goodness. Can you tell I'm bored of this course by now? I stopped to edit this video, which means I have to watch it all again. Send me pity, please. And pictures of puppies. I'll take them both. Fun side note though, I love this woman's jumper. I kind of want it. If anyone knows where that's from, let me know, because it's cute. I like it. Oh my god, though, the quality of this lesson is just horrific. This woman's audio is terrible. It's really, really hard to listen to. Again, when people are paying for this, just don't. Bethany should have done a quick test before she recorded this, or, you know, if something went wrong and it was an accident and you found out at the end, like, just reshoot it. Redo it, because this is not good enough. I've said it before, but like, mistakes on YouTube are expected. These things happen. You're providing content for free, so mistakes are excusable. You know, it's one of those things. Life happening around you is excusable and understandable, because this is essentially like a platform for us recording in our own homes. It's very casual stuff, but this is a very expensive paid course. And I have to ask, what exactly am I paying for? This isn't well produced, it's not informative, it's had clearly minimal work go into it, it's lazily made, and I'm incredibly disappointed. I would be disappointed if I'd paid like 10 quid for this course, never mind the 80 that I paid, or the $169 that Bethany is actually asking. So this opens with Bethany saying that no one ever talks about seeing a sex therapist and no one knows how to find one. Meanwhile, Tish is constantly ing more than Bethany ever has. It is so difficult to listen to. Tish's answer is basically, yeah, it's because of religious trauma. Again, but she never actually calls it religious trauma, sadly. Again, so close to being aware, so far. Bethany then goes on to talk about how older couples have shamed her for recommending sex therapists to people, and she's like, no, I'm not changing. And honestly, I have to say, good on her for like sticking to her guns like that. I respect that. You know, people are trying to silence her from doing good, and she's like, no, screw that, I'm doing my own thing. Hell yeah, I respect that. And I never thought I'd say I respect Bethany Beal, but in this case, yeah, good on her.
I remember recently, actually, I had suggested in a resource that I had created, this was not that long ago, that if, you know, you need help in this area, like definitely seek out a sex therapist. And an older couple saw that and actually mentioned to me like, hey, you might want to actually take that out. You know, like sex therapists, like, you know, and I was like, in my brain, I was like, my mind was blown a little bit because I was so shocked that like, well, where are some people supposed to go? You know, like there aren't a lot of people like it's hard to find like mentors and people who are going to be really open about the really hard stuff going on, or just like the confusing questions. And if we are literally like a generation is even telling people like myself, like, hey, you probably don't want to recommend someone seeing a sex therapist. It's like, like that just blew my mind in a really sad way. And so it's sad for me to think that not only, you know, women might feel uncomfortable, couples might feel uncomfortable, but there may even be people telling them like, hey, you shouldn't do this. So I'm just so excited to kind of like break some of those, like, I don't know, stigmas about what people might even think a sex therapist is. Because when I heard you and saw you for the first time, I was like, this is amazing. You know, this is so incredible. And I don't know what stigmas people have, but she is not it. Like, she is wonderful and so incredible. So I'm just curious, what are some of the biggest reasons that people actually come to see you or to, in general, see a sex therapist?
Tish then comes in and ruins it by warning against secular sex therapists. Come on. And then she sells her own therapy business and the place where she trained, and even giving out her email and stuff like that. Ugh, this is one big ad, seriously. So after telling everyone, you need a sex therapist, find a Christian sex therapist, pay me to be your sex therapist, Bethany finally asks, wait, what is sex therapy? Like, that shouldn't have been the first thing in the video. There's kind of a bit of an answer, I guess. It's adequate. Yeah. And then they start with this nonsense.
What is healthy sexuality? Like, what are you wanting? What does that look like? And not every couple is the same. You know, there are some, of course, very basic, healthy truths about sexuality. You know, God's design for sexuality is to be an expression of connection and emotional intimacy.
So there's no right or wrong for sexuality, no objective truths, except these specific ones that you're going to mention now, which is why I guess you need a Christian sex therapist. For God's sake, it's such a mess.
Some of the most common presenting issues that I see are women that will come in with sexual aversion for numerous reasons, but where their nervous system has paired kind of disgust and shame with sexuality. And then sexual abuse survivors and more newly married couples who just did not have information.
Yes.
And they get married and they're like, whoa, this is not what we thought. What do we do? And what is going on? And
it's true.
And so I work, those couples come in a lot. And then of course, you know, erectile dysfunction, where there's just other dysfunction that couples are trying to navigate. They need treatment for.
Again, interesting how all but maybe the last one can be traced back to religious trauma. Like, there's a higher number of women who feel shame because of purity culture, a high rate of sexual abuse among fundies, a lower level of sex ed among fundies. All of these issues can be traced back to religion and religious trauma and fundamentalism, and yet you're sat here telling me, no, religion isn't the issue. You need more religion to fix it. It just doesn't sit right with me. And again, if you like more context around these issues of, you know, sexual abuse and religion and stuff like that, I would recommend you check out my video on the IBLP's homeschooling resources, because it shows just how these cult-like fundamentalist religions directly cause so many of these issues in people from a young age and indoctrinate people to essentially become easy target victims. And yeah, it's bad.
You know, when you mentioned newlywed couples coming, I'm like, man, I almost wish this could somehow be a part of like a required like marriage, like getting ready for a marriage, like premarital counseling.
Yeah, and I wish religion wasn't this damaging in the first place, but here we are. I do have a problem with Bethany saying this, and I want to make sure I'm trying to express this in the right way. The thing is, there is, and I want to make this very clear, there is absolutely no shame or problem at all in needing any kind of therapy, including sex therapy. Going to see a sex therapist does not mean there's something wrong with you. But we also have to acknowledge that sometimes going to see a sex therapist is the result of trauma or a harmful upbringing, right? And that's what Bethany is displaying here. She is saying she had a harmful upbringing, it caused trauma and damage in her, and that's why she needed to see a sex therapist. She's not quite that blunt about it, but it's very clear that that's what's going on, you know? But what kind of I find upsetting and maybe problematic is, I don't know if problematic is the right word, but like, I think the issue here is that Bethany seems to think that growing up with that kind of trauma to the point where you need therapy is normal or acceptable or something that just everyone deals with. It's to be expected, you know? Not all of us grew up with trauma like that. Some of us did get a good sex education from school and stuff like that. Some of us became sexually active on our own timescales, not on ones imposed by other people like Bethany did. Not all of us have issues around sex that require therapy. And I don't say this to be kind of braggy and be like, oh, see, I'm better than you because I don't need therapy. I do not at all mean it like that. I say it because I want people like Bethany to realise that the way she was brought up, the trauma that she suffered, the harm that was done to her is not normal. It's not the only way to be. There's plenty of us who didn't experience what she did and consequently have a very healthy attitude to and relationship with sex. And I feel like Bethany and people like her maybe need to be a little more open to hearing that and realising that there are ways to bring your kids up with a healthy attitude to sex where they won't need therapy, because she is part of raising this next generation, right? And I feel like if she doesn't realise that what she went through isn't normal or healthy, then she risks putting her own kids through the same thing. Does that make sense? So like, if she ends up sheltering her kids in similar ways to how she was sheltered, if she forces them to only have sex after marriage, not when they're ready, if she doesn't allow them access to good educational resources, if they grow up hearing her say things like, newlyweds know nothing, you need therapy or you'll find it hard, and so on, she risks causing the same issues in them as she had. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, you know? So that's why I'm saying there's a bit of an issue with Bethany's thinking here. This is why it concerns me. This is why I find it problematic. This is why I bring this up. I just hope I'm expressing that in the right way, you know? I hope that makes sense. Bethany then goes on to ask more questions about like, oh, what'd you do if you've never orgasmed?
But the most common thing I think I hear from women is when it comes to orgasm and just like the confusion around that and the struggle with that. Like, I don't even know if I have, or I've been married for several years and I haven't. And I know for me, that was really confusing as well. So is that a reason to see a sex therapist? And if you do see a sex therapist with that struggle, like what can you expect to learn, to hear? Like, what would that look like? Because I just know that's one of the most common things I hear.
She claims a lot of her viewers ask this question. She claims she used to struggle with this, but not anymore, honest, not anymore. I've totally done that. What is it? But honestly, no, the amount of times she's asked this question in this course kind of leaves me wondering, like, are you sure you didn't just make this course to get free therapy yourself, Bethany? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, the other issue, oh my god, the other thing is, this woman says absolutely way too much. She starts every answer to Bethany with, absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Counseling.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 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 Absolutely.
I'm sure I have some annoying tics and tendencies, and I probably say like and right and you know too much, but also absolutely.
What is that where it's like we know in our heads that God designed sex and it's like, okay, save it for marriage. This is the one place where you can really just jump in and woohoo, go for it. But then you get there and you're like, like why? I don't know. Like, like, why do you think that God made it that way? Where we have to really work at it for a lot of couples. Like, it doesn't just come like easily. I mean, I don't know. Does that make that question just came to mind? And I'm just curious what you think.
Oh, and I feel like we could do a whole other conversation about this because my mind is going to a lot of places.
Then, annoyingly, they bring up the penners again. For God's sake, stop it, please. Why do so many of these women read these books? Actually, apparently, it seems like these books are where they all get this stupid idea of, like, men are all the same, but, like, women are totally picky. Like, all that crap from.
One of my favorite authors, the Penners, they liken it to, like, a man is like a sun, you know, rises and sets, same way. Pretty much the same thing will work every time. But a woman, because of our cycle and our
Yeah.
hormones, we are like the moon, and our like hormonal cycle and even just what our body experiences in a month, it actually will change how certain things feel physically.
Wow.
Seriously, men, like I've said it before in this video, men have hormonal fluctuations too. Men have different moods too. Men's bodies also want different things at different times. Why are they all so keen to push this idea like, oh, men are so like overly simple and you just don't even need to try and understand them because they're all the same and they're always the same and but it feels incredibly disrespectful and harmful to men. Can they just stop? And then they just promote more of the Penner's terrible books. Great. Ugh, okay, right, last lesson. I'm so bored of this now. Let's do this. Session 11. This is the bonus session, apparently. This is prepping for a great honeymoon with Bethany Beal. This is another one Bethany teaches. Okay, last lesson. 48 minutes of Bethany talking about her wedding and honeymoon. Let's do this. Honestly, there's nothing new in this lesson that Bethany hasn't said before in other free resources. It's just a rehash of podcasts she's done with Bethany and Dave and interviews she's done on other people's podcasts and so nothing is new here. Nothing at all. In fact, most of the stuff she says in this I addressed in more detail in the Saga of Bethany Beal video. And I didn't even need to pay to see that stuff.
What is up? If you are watching this, it means you are seriously dating or engaged, or maybe you're a newlywed, but you are in that time of life where it is just so exciting, so fun to anticipate all that's to come.
No. No, I'm never planning on marrying. But I do have 14 or so years of sexual experience, so yeah, I'm really not Bethany's target audience, am I? I can respect what Bethany is trying to do here, though. It's essentially a prep for your first time thing, which is useful for people. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would hope the focus is on things like talking to your partner about how you both know if you're ready for physical intimacy, because it should be when you're ready and not just when the wedding date is. You know, it should be something you decide for yourself and that isn't, you know, you don't have a set date of like getting married on this date, so it has to be a disturbed. No. You need to figure out between yourselves when you're ready. I would hope the focus is also on how to give consent, how to hear consent, how to have safe sex and use contraception, the basics of what sex will physically involve and how it might differ between different couples, how to stay physically safe, the importance of regular STI testing before and after you're sexually active, the importance of having a safe space to have sex in, how do you know your partner's right for you, the importance of good hygiene and what that means on a practical level, all that important stuff. That is what I would expect a prepping for your first time video to cover. Bethany hits some of the points. Sadly, not all, but
I have been married for 4 years and I can so remember the engagement stage leading up to the honeymoon. I mean, it is just so exciting and overwhelming and like scary all at the same time. If you're someone who is like, I've never had sex before, but I'm super pumped, glad you're here. Or maybe you're someone who's like, yeah, me and my boyfriend or fiance, we've had sex, but we really want to wait now until marriage. So glad you're here.
And if you're an annoying YouTuber reviewing my course, so mad you're here.
As you approach your wedding day, I want you to think of approaching sex and intimacy as like an on-ramp. And so sometimes what happens is people are like, okay, no sex before marriage, so I'm not going to think about it, talk about it, and then I'm just going to get married. And on my honeymoon, the first night, I'm just supposed to turn the switch and everything's going to just be amazing and all fall into place. I don't want you to think of it like that. I want you to think of it more as like, okay, physically, my husband and I are not going to have sexual intimacy because that's God's good design and his plan. But mentally and emotionally and wisdom wise, I am going to start preparing for this moment before it actually happens. And so,
you know what, actually, runny nose and hitting the mic aside, quite like this advice. Good job, Bethany. She said it before in other podcasts and stuff. We covered it in the Saga of Bethany Beal stuff. I think it's good advice.
You have taken, especially the first few weeks before you got married, to seek wisdom, to go through courses like this, to talk to a really godly married friend.
She did lose me a bit though when she said, like, you can prep by watching courses like this though. Please, please do not. I do not recommend this course to anybody. Okay, cool. We're now 10 minutes into this video and Bethany has made one good point, then repeated it a lot.
There's actually a couple, the Penners, Cliff and Joyce Penner. They have several books, and they have, I've linked it in this series before, but they actually, in some of their books, they actually give out their phone number and they say, hey, if you're on your honeymoon and you need help, just text us. We are more than happy to help you. So there are people like that where you can, literally reach out to. They're medical professionals and have been talking about sex forever. So there are also people that you can reach out to if you need help like that, which is amazing.
Oh, for God's sake, these two again. Oh, stop it. But also, that seems like a recipe for disaster. Who would give out their phone number in a book to a bunch of strangers and be like, yeah, strangers, text me about this super vulnerable, intimate thing on your honeymoon? Bit weird, I'll be honest. Next up, Bethany says, again, so much of the same stuff she said before on the Girl Defined podcasts. Set expectations for the first night, talk to your insecurities before you get married, talk to older people. Not terrible stuff, but nothing we haven't heard from her before, so why are we paying for this? Some reminders that sex is just for marriage. You mean, yeah, it's only for two people. Only for a man and a woman, a blah, 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 shut up. Then she calls out purity culture again and tells people to be more open to new experiences, so that's fun. She tells people to get to know your body in terms of actual, physiology, but again, doesn't teach us any of that stuff, doesn't tell us what anything is. It's not actually teaching us anything, it's not actually a resource. Are you seeing the same criticisms coming up again and again and again and again and again because it's all the same problems over and over? There's another creepy, you're a school teacher in the bedroom reference, which I am not comfortable with. Can we please stop with this? Now.
No, you are very active in this. You are helping him. You are teaching him. You really are his school teacher in the bedroom for your own pleasure. Really recommend, especially as you're early on, use lots and lots and lots of lube. One of the biggest causes and reasons for pain in sex is because people don't use enough lube. And I don't know why some people think it's like a downgrade if you have to use lube. I highly recommend using a ton of lube, especially on your honeymoon, especially the first few times, because that's going to really help you enjoy, experience pleasure. So as you're getting going already right away, you just, even as you're touching each other in foreplay, already put lube on each other, and you can put lube on yourself and just start allowing your body to feel soft and sensual and smooth.
Hey, look at this is actually some practical advice she tells us, and then she recommends some lubes, which is great, amazing, good job, Bethany.
Some of my favorite lubes, I would definitely recommend Astroglide. I think it's one of the better ones.
Really impressed with this bit. I do wish she'd gone into more detail, but as it is, not terrible, In terms of more detail, I wish she'd gone on to tell us about different types of lube. It's all good saying use lube, but if you've never used it before, it can be intimidating. There are different kinds. You go to a shop and you have 10 different brands in front of you, a whole bunch of flavors, textures, ones made of different stuff, ones that say they do all these different things, and you're like, well, which one do I use? It can be intimidating. How do you know which one to pick? To put it all very, very simply, you can get different lubricants which have, basically they're made of different things. Some are water-based, others are oil-based, some are silicone-based, others are hybrids. The one you use will depend on what you want to use it for. Are you using it with any physical contraceptives like condoms? If so, what are they made of? Do you want one with any special properties, like you can get flavored ones that tingle, ones that have a warming sensation, and so on. It sounds a lot. It's not as complicated and intimidating as it might seem. So if you do want to learn a little bit more about this and get to know the specifics of what each thing is for and what you might like to use, and especially which one should you use with different contraceptives and stuff like that, I will leave a link in, again, the resource document in the description of this video. And there's a great article on there that talks you through different types of lube, what they're for, how to get a hold of them, basically which one to pick. Really, really good resource. Bethany then talks about preventing UTIs. It's all fine, to be honest. No problem there. She does say stuff like, consult a professional. Don't take my word for it. Because Bethany, again, you're not a professional. Why are you selling a course on this? Then there's another baby interruption. I'm just like, please just edit this out. We don't need it. You don't need to do this all in one big long tape. Just put some work in, please.
Food store. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're so sweaty from nursing. You know how babies get so sweaty. Babies get so... Oh! babies get so sweaty from nursing. You want to start taking D-mannose as soon as you are able, and just follow the instructions on the bottle, and you can even research it, but it's basically a urinary tract cleanser. So it is an amazing way to help prep your body and then prevent UTIs as you're on your honeymoon. So like, do not end up there if at all possible. So that's why I gave you all of those recommendations. Audrey is making some noise. She's a happy girl. So I hope that's helpful. And again, consult your healthcare professional, your doctor, your OB-GYN, whoever you see. Talk to them about some of the best practices, things that you can do, because it's super important to make sure that you are prepared. Now, a yeast infection is something that women can experience as well. A yeast infection, the primary... You are so loud right now, silly girl. The primary symptom of that is itching. I know she's being such an interruption, but she's being hilarious. She never does this. The primary symptom of a yeast infection is itching. You have Sorry. I'm not going to cut this because these are just like coffee shop conversations, but it is cracking me up right now. She's cracking me up. The primary sign of a yeast infection is itching.
Yeah, she's just hilarious. The one time in your course you're actually teaching us really good information and you can't even edit around a baby squealing. Again, in a regular YouTube video, I wouldn't care. It's fine, it's YouTube. But this is a course you're charging a lot of money for. Do better. Then she ends by selling her stupid downloadable questions from couples PDF, which, again, I've seen. So I think someone posted it on Reddit somewhere. And it was terrible. And then that's it. That is the end of the lesson. And that is the end of Bethany Beal's ultimate sex course for Christian women. Or woman, if you like typos. So there are a couple of other little bits to cover, like the last few pages of the workbook. So the workbook, as well as having like a ton of blank pages for note-taking, also contains resource lists, which feature a lot of the stuff that Bethany and her guests were trying to sell in the videos. Not quite everything, but a chunk of them, I went through all these and I added up all the paid resources that she advertises in the workbook. Some of them I try to be quite lenient with. So for some of the counselors she promoted, I only added, for example, like a month's worth of sessions with them to the list, or a month's worth of supplements from that Leah tried to sell and stuff like that. Overall, I put all this together, all the books they recommended, the courses they recommended, the things like card decks for sexy games, coaching and therapy, like all this sort of stuff. I put it all together and it comes to nearly $3,500. I just paid £80, should have been more, to be sold and advertised $3,500 worth of crap and not a lot else. Can you believe it? I know. And finally, the workbook ends with some attempts at, I guess, like worksheets, but they're just kind of not. Like there's this one that asks, how has this course changed your opinion on sex? Well, I used to love it, but now I just feel a aching sadness deep in my soul for Bethany and her followers. Does that count? Oh my god. Then we get a daily intimacy checklist and a sex schedule and some other sexy goodies. And that's it. Done. Wow, that is Bethany Beal's sex course. What an experience. I can honestly say I learned nothing, which is a shame. I genuinely thought there would at least be something new or interesting that I hadn't heard before or that she might cover, but even the stuff about how pregnancy changes your body or dealing with infertility and stuff like that, it wasn't anything new I haven't learnt before. It's stuff that I haven't personally experienced, but it wasn't new or informative. Honestly, most of the stuff in this is stuff that Bethany has already put out for free elsewhere. So, honestly, I'd say, don't waste your money. Even if you are the target audience for this, and by which I mean you're like a fundie with no sexual experience, even if you are in that category, you don't need to pay for this course. There's nothing you're getting here that you can't get better elsewhere. And even if you're a big Bethany Beal fan, you can get this stuff from her for free elsewhere. Like, it's not at all worth the money, the time, none of it. So, in conclusion, please don't spend your money on this course. It's not worth it at all. That is my review, my judgment. But if you want to, I guess I would try it out for yourself, I guess. But in all honesty, a better way to spend your money is to donate to charities who are combating so much of the harmful messages that people like Bethany and her, I guess you could say, colleagues are putting out into the world. They have, over the years, put out so much misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic content that it's just not even funny. It's disgusting, it's harmful, and we do need to fight it. That's what I try and do with my content, and that's what I want to try and promote and encourage other people to do too. So, if you do have a little bit of spare money, if you can afford it, obviously put yourself and your families first, but if you can, I do recommend a donation to a charity like Mermaids, because the work they do is invaluable. They care so much about the needs and the mental health of young people who are questioning their gender, who are wanting to transition, and also families who are wanting to support transgender and non-binary youths in their lives. Mermaids is a charity that literally saves lives, and the work they do is so important, and I cannot recommend the need to support charities like them enough. So like I say, I'm going to be donating at least 80 quid of my own money to them. I'm going to be donating a portion of profits from this video as well, and if you can help support them and donate, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, you can help by spreading awareness of the amazing work they do. Give them a little shout out on social media or something like that. Every little helps. And yeah, that's what I want your main takeaway to be from this video. There are better sex ed resources out there. There are better people you can be supporting with your money. And other than that, I think that's all I want to say today. I think my little baby Bean has just woken up and wants to go for a walk, don't you? Hi, gorgeous. Would you like to come say hi at the end of the video? Yeah? Oh, big stretch, baby. Big stretch. You want to say hi to everyone? Mwah. Mwah. Good girl. You can say hi. You're a beautiful one, aren't you? You're a beautiful one. Oh my god, this beautiful little bean gave me the fright of my life this weekend. Didn't you, Angel? Yes. So we had a little bit of an emergency. We woke up yesterday morning and she's lying in bed next to me like she normally is. She pulls me awake, she taps me, she gives my face a little lick, and I'm like, oh, baby Bean want breakfast. You want breakfast. So we go to get out of bed and she can't walk. She literally could not walk. She couldn't put any weight on her back legs. When she tried, they were just slipping from under her, like she couldn't feel them there at all. They were just kind of like flopping under her, and my god, I've never been more scared in my life. So I'm in tears. I call up Kyra and I'm like, I think I need to take her to the vets. So I call the emergency vets because it's a Sunday morning, and so I call the emergency vets and get her an appointment. I call up my friend Joe and I'm in tears. I'm like, can you please drive us to the vet? And he was like, I'm there, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Bless him, wonderful friend. So he rushes over, Kieran rushes to meet us at the vets, and we take her in, and by the time we get there, she can stand on her legs again. And it turns out what the vet thinks happens is she probably pulls some muscles down here, and it was kind of exacerbated by a little bit of arthritis she has, because she's getting old now, aren't you, baby bear? Yes, my little old lady. So apparently the vet can feel a bit of, and hear a bit of, I don't know the correct term for it, but basically like friction in her joints. And it's a little bit of arthritis she has, which is completely normal and common for a dog of her age and breed. And if she'd done a little bit too much exercise on Saturday, which we may have done from playing a lot of fetch, isn't that right? Yeah. Then there's a chance she just pulled some muscles, the arthritis made it a bit worse, and that's why she couldn't walk properly. So all she needs is a little bit of muscle massage, don't you? Which you love. Yes. Some painkillers, which you can just have paracetamol, can't you? Yes, baby Bean. And since then, she's been absolutely fine. She's a little stiff today, aren't you? Oh, careful, I got you. She's a little stiff today, but look at her, standing on her back legs, putting weight on them, absolutely fine. You're pretty much walking around as normal, aren't you? Just a little bit slower. Yeah. But bless her. Yeah, she's going to be absolutely fine, but she just panicked me for a bit, didn't you? You scared me, you silly little bean. Poor little baby. Oh, you baby. I got you. I got you. Basically, at this point, it's just about kind of monitoring her, keeping her safe. If she seems to be struggling anymore, giving her some painkillers, and just kind of taking it easy for a little bit, yeah? And just in case there is a sprain here, you have been told not to play fetch for a week, haven't you? Which you're very grumpy about. Very grumpy. It's all she wants to do. So that's why you're a little bit off today, aren't you? You're feeling a little bit sorry for yourself. You're taking it easy, aren't you, baby? But I got your back. I'm looking after you. And she has been so brave. I am so, so proud of her. You were so well behaved at the vets, weren't you? Yes. And she has been nothing but an angel. And I'm really proud of how well she coped. And you're going to be absolutely fine, aren't you, my angel? You're okay there. You booping into the microphone? Yeah? You're a good girl. Give me a smooch. Mwah. I love you. Thank you. I've got you. Thank you. So yeah, in summary, she terrified me, but she's going to be absolutely fine. Anyway, sorry, a little Kubi moment there to end the video. We needed a little bit of a palate cleanser with your gorgeous face, didn't we? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyway, that's where I'm going to end the video today. Thank you so much for watching today. Please let me know your thoughts on this video down in the comments. I can't wait to read them. If you're new here, hi, welcome to my channel. It would be great if you subscribed. I make a ton of videos on kind of basic social commentary, a lot of feminist topics, atheist topics, pro-LGBTQ plus topics. I also cover lots of book reviews, some science stuff, some history stuff, lots of education. It's all fun. And of course, I have this gorgeous girl here with me a lot of the time, don't I? Yes. So if you'd like to come on this journey with us, that would be absolutely wonderful. It's great to have you here. But yeah, just thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys a lot, and I'll see you again very, very soon. You okay, beautiful? You okay? Should we go walkies? Yeah, you want to go walkies? Come on then, I'll lift you down. Mwah. I love you. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I got ya. I got ya.